Welcome, everybody. On the behalf of the program committee and Samvera steering, I want to welcome all of you to Samvera Connect 2020. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rosalind Metz, and I am the current chair of Samvera steering. In my spare time, I am also the Associate Dean for Library Technology and Digital Strategies at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a white female in my 40s with long light brown hair, wearing a black jacket in front of a blue wall. Thank you all for coming to this event. We hope that you enjoy all the presentations, workshops, and poster sessions. If you're posting on social media, we encourage you to use the hashtag Samvera Connect 2020, which you can see on the screen right now. Also, a reminder that the events are being recorded and will be on the Samvera community YouTube channel within the week. Finally, if you have any questions at all, please use the Zoom Q&A button and we will try to get to everyone's questions. Before we move on to our usual thank yous, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Julie Allenson. I've asked a handful of people to help me describe Julie, recognizing that there may be folks in our community that weren't lucky enough to get to know her. Some of the words they use to describe her are kind, welcoming, good, both good-natured and good-humored, supportive, considerate, curious, patient, mentor, talented, hilarious, funny, open, witty, British, which definitely helps describe the wit, humble, determined, fierce, but most importantly, friend. I think my favorite description of Julie came from Julie Hardesty, who said, "In the realms of Julies, she is one of the all-time greats. We miss you, Julie." As many of you may know, and perhaps like me are lamenting, we should all be together in Santa Barbara at UCSB. Unfortunately, the pandemic has spoiled those plans, but we want to take a moment to thank the staff at UCSB for all the hard work they did to pull together hotels, venues, etc., for what would have been a great time. You also may be wondering about the future of Samvera Connect. I know I'm hoping to be able to get to Santa Barbara soon. Notre Dame will host Samvera Connect 2021, and they are currently working on plans for pulling that conference together. UCSB will host Samvera Connect 2022. As with all things that happen during these uncertain times, this may change depending on so many things. But stay tuned for more information. We will keep you posted as we know more. Next, I want to take a moment to thank everyone that has been a part of making Samvera Connect virtual happen. Those people include the program committee, which is Brian McBride, Abigail Bordeaux, Jeremy Friesen, Nabila Jaffer, Elliot Jordan, Kevin Kochansky, David Schober, and Heather Greer-Klein. The mentoring team of Nabila Jaffer, Chris R., Chris Colbard, Robin, and our social events team, Jim, Timothy, Julie, Anna, Catherine, Ilkai, and Jeremy. Finally, our tech team, Elliot, David, and John. I also want to thank all of our helpers, everyone presenting posters, workshops, and presentations. At this moment, many of you are probably wondering why I skipped Richard's Green name in the list of thank yous. So let me address that. For those of you that don't know Richard Green is currently the operations advisor for the Samvera community. But really, that description doesn't do justice to what Richard has done for this community. Richard was amongst the original founders of the community, and over the years, he has been a huge part of sustaining the community by engaging in and supporting the day-to-day operations. He has also been an integral part of this event for many, many years. In January, Richard will be retiring and he will be missed. By the way, right now in my head, I can hear Richard groaning that I am doing this. And also, he has made it nearly impossible for me to hide what I have been up to. He keeps checking in about these slides in particular, and I've had to delete this slide like 3 times. But Richard, I have news. This presentation has been done for at least a week. I've been lying to you this whole time. Since this is the last time we will all come together before Richard retires, I want to take this moment to thank Richard for all he has done for the community. I also want to invite Chris R. at Hull, Tom Kramer at Stanford, and Brian McBride at the University of Utah to say a few words about Richard. First up is Chris.
Thank you, Rosie. Hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Orr, and I am currently interim university librarian at the University of Hull. It is through Hull that Richard became engaged with, in order, Fedora, Hydra, and then Samvera. Richard has occasionally, on reaching certain age milestones, expressed the thought, how did I get here? It feels appropriate to use this as a starting point in looking back and appreciating the many ways that Richard has enriched the people and communities he has worked with. I first met Richard in 2005, I think, it might have been 2004, when Ian Dolphin, the current Apereo executive director, but then my boss at the University of Hull, invited Richard to take on the role of project manager for the first of 3 repository-focused projects we did with JISC between 2005 and 2011. During and after which time he also oversaw our own institutional implementation of Hydra, as it was. We both have much to thank or blame Ian for putting us on the path of engagement with open source communities, but are both the richer for it. In Richard's case, it was a chance to exercise the many skills he had accumulated from over 30 years of teaching in a new and, I would say, exciting way. And we have all benefited from his patience, humor, methodical approach, and polite prodding at times to get things done over the years. We had chosen to use Fedora as the basis of our repository at Hull, and this led us to engage with the nascent Fedora community at the time. This introduced Richard to what was to become almost a second home for the next few years, the Cavalier Inn at UVA in Charlottesville, and, the ultimate delicacy, Spudnuts. Work on Hull's repository led to Richard presenting about issues and plans related to establishing a flexible front end for Fedora at Open Repositories 2008 in Southampton, which in turn, thank you to Thorny Staples, led to the type of conference conversation that can go places you never imagined, and back to the Cavalier Inn and UVA. Note, it is always worth presenting at conferences on your work. From those initial meetings at UVA's Alderman Library came the ideas that have shaped what we now have in Samvera. It doesn't feel like over 10 years ago, so to ask the question again, how did we get here? A major part of that has been through Richard being steadfast in bringing his own ideas to the table and the wonderfully open, honest ways in which he has helped to express what we thought and helped mold it into the community we have today. Build on firm foundations, and you have a good place to develop from. I should also note that Richard's contribution to the repository landscape has also been recognized more widely over the years, with his serving as vice chair of the Open Repositories Conference Series for a number of years. I have more recently this year also realized the extent to which, over the years, Richard has been a trendsetter. One of the perennial joys of many Zoom meetings with Richard, once we started using that system for Samvera meetings, was having one of his cats wander across the board and screen and keyboard. Having had more online meetings this year than I care to remember, I now realize that this, at least at the University of Hull, is almost a required element. Long may it continue. Throughout the time I have known Richard, I have always valued his calm voice and support, maybe with occasional exasperation, in all the projects we took forward at Hull, at least until the money ran out, that is, I'm afraid. I feel very proud that Hull was able, in its small way, to bring Richard to the table that is Samvera. In turn, I'd like to thank Richard for the lounge access that his many air miles helped to provide for our trips to Samvera meetings. Throughout our work together, I have really enjoyed Richard's enthusiasm for tackling a problem, getting to the root of it, and his satisfaction of finding a way through it, not least in working with the aforementioned Julie Allinson in creating the architecture that was the subject of the poster presented earlier this week on Hull's digital preservation solution. I hope that will continue, and I'd note that as a retirement hobby, he has already been setting up a volunteer role to complete an image collection we have at Hull. I would like to dearly thank Richard's partner, another Ian, for letting Samvera have so much of Richard's time, and I would like to end by very much thanking Richard, especially for his friendship. Thank you.
Next up is Tom. Tom.
I am here. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to join yet another Samvera meeting, and I'm especially pleased to be part of Rosalind and the organizer's scheming to do this, hopefully to Richard's both joy and perhaps slight chagrin. Chris covered a lot of the early background of working with Richard. I think I first met Richard at the same time I met Chris in a trip to University of Hull in probably about 2007, where we compared notes on many things, including repositories and Fedora. And a lot of that laid the grounds for the founding of then the Hydra project. In 2008, starting in September, we had realized that there was enough common interest between University of Hull, Stanford University, and University of Virginia that we convened several meetings at Charlottesville, Virginia, which was roughly the midpoint, or as close to the midpoint as we could get. And over the course of 6 months, we had 5 separate meetings there. After the third meeting in December of 2008, we decided that there was something here, and that's where Hydra was born. Many of those meetings were seminal to Hydra and now Samvera, and really established some key traditions, including essential ones such as dinners out, especially at Indian restaurants. We established very early on, and I think this is what actually made the project work, is that we would tolerate the extra English use in words such as humor and color in the notes, as long as Richard also tolerated the lack of use when Lynn or I took notes. We figured out very quickly that Richard was a cat lover, because it turned out on one particular fleece, there was always a little bit of cat that had traveled with him to Charlottesville. And he and Chris seemed to have an incredible propensity not only to lose their luggage on these transatlantic flights, sometimes getting it back before they had to leave, sometimes not, but also the ability to get by with giftware from the University of Virginia bookstore. On a more serious note, it was at that time that I realized that Richard has a key gift, and that is, after several hours of conversation, really exploring something where people have simply lost the will to proceed but are going to just pretend everything worked out, he will say at the end, "I'm sorry, I just don't understand." And he will force the group back into discussion to come to some salient points and some takeaways. It turns out this is absolutely essential in a project such as Samvera and a community, to make sure that what we're saying at least makes sense to us, because if it doesn't, it probably isn't going to make sense to anyone else in the community moving forward. It was also at that time that I realized then that Richard had an uncanny gift, as did so many people in Samvera, for his willingness to pitch in, to write up, to plan, to follow up, to communicate, to organize, to host, to administer. These are just the absolute solid foundation that are required to go from a small group of collaborators to the hundreds of collaborators that are on this call today. If you know Richard personally, you might also know what we in the United States might call that he was a vice principal at a school in the UK. And I think these qualities have really carried through. In addition to his clarity of thinking and communication, you can sense his commitment to the public, to service, an unfailing sense of trust, and just downright competence. I tried to make a list of all of the different roles that Richard had played throughout the years in the project and in the community, and it was a bit long. So I think Richard has been a founder, a leader, a convener, a program organizer, a presenter, an analyst, a tester, a document writer, a webmaster, a pillar of the community, a conscience of the community, its organizational memory, a fellow traveler, and a friend. And I think one of the great things about a community like Samvera is that many hands make light work, and there's always room for more people. It's also true, perhaps, that there are only a few people without which Samvera couldn't be what it is today, and Richard is one of those people. So Richard, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you and being your friend over the years. Without you, there wouldn't be an us.
Thanks, Tom. Finally, Brian has a few words to say about Richard.
Surprise, Richard. I hope the past couple of weeks withholding information from you has not left you with a sour opinion of me. We've been working behind the scenes to put together a short farewell and thank you, and it's been difficult not having you partake in this part of Connect. These past few years of working with you have meant a lot to me. I have cherished your expertise, mentoring, insight, genuine care, and friendship. Not only have you taught me so many things about the Samvera community, but now I know the meaning of gobsmacked. I'm going to miss our annual Samvera Connect program committee meetings, where we not only discussed improving the Connect experience, but also had the opportunity to speak about our love for travel, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Your suggestions on places to visit along the Oregon coast have truly been wonderful. Since meeting you, my family has taken at least one vacation a year to the beautiful Oregon coast. We've hiked at Cola State Park, walked the beaches around Seaside and Cannon, and created wonderful, priceless memories at your suggestion. Richard, you've done an amazing job of managing our community over the past 10 years. Samvera is where it is today largely because of your organizing and planning efforts you have made over the years, especially with Connect. Connect wouldn't be Connect without you. Your commitment to helping this community is unparalleled. Your passion is inspiring. You've built a legacy of collaboration and connectivity through Samvera that will continue on, but you will be missed. Thank you for all that you have done, and thank you most especially for your friendship. I hope that you, Ian, William Whiskers, and your other feline family members are able to travel again soon.
I'm going to jump in at that point before other people get back on track with the program and just say thank you. Brian mentioned the word gobsmacked, which means just utterly stunned and shocked, and I am gobsmacked by this last 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you ever so much. It's been a pleasure working with you all, and yes, thank you very much indeed. Let's have a good conference.
Well, thank you, Richard. And thank you for all that you have done for this community. I personally will miss your support and guidance. And I think I can say on behalf of the whole community, best wishes and safe travels once we are all allowed to do that again. Next up, we will have Jessica Hilt, who has recorded a video, provide us an overview of the Code of Conduct.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Jessica Hilt, and I am the Manager of Applications Development for the University of California, San Diego. I am a white female in my 40s with COVID gray.
Oops, sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Jessica Hilt, and I am the Manager of Applications Development for the University of California, San Diego. I am a white female in my 40s with COVID gray hair, wearing a black shirt, and I'm a disembodied head that will be reading the slides to you today for our Samvera participation agreement. Samvera is dedicated to providing a welcoming and harassment-free community experience for everyone. Samvera was conceived and executed as a collaborative, open source effort from its beginning and committed to openness and transparency in all that it does: code, designs, discussions. We are equally committed to helpful and respectful communication. Historically, women, people of color, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups have been excluded from technology and, ironically, from open source software communities in particular. The Samvera community is committed to removing barriers to participation wherever they exist. The Samvera community is a vibrant, dynamic, and sometimes chaotic space. We believe one of our major strengths is our ability to work together collaboratively, supporting one another personally and professionally. We are not perfect and we don't always get it right, but we strive to apply all these principles, each of the values listed here, to our work and interactions. To the best of our abilities, we work to be humble and responsive rather than defensive. And when someone calls us out on not living up to these intentions, we respond with that. The community has both an official code of conduct and an official anti-harassment policy. The code of conduct expresses our aspirations about how we want to work and interact. The anti-harassment policy provides a framework to deal effectively with issues and to make any issues that make any member of the community feel unsafe or threatened. The goal of the policy is to provide prompt and supportive assistance to anyone subject to any form of harassment. The policy is only one aspect of our broader desire to build a diverse and welcoming community that encourages participation and contribution from all participants without bias. If you see something missing, we invite your input to the policy in making Samvera a better place. If you haven't already, please take the time to review the documents today. We expect participants at all community events and forums to honor these standards. Building on the framework provided by the two policy documents, Samvera community members work together to create and promote a welcoming and safe community. If a situation arises that you feel you cannot address alone, please contact a member of this year's program committee, a member of steering, or a helper. We are well positioned and prepared to assist you. Helpers are distinguished by the special rainbow symbol on by their names in Slack, and helpers are volunteers that give their time to ensure that Samvera remains a safe community for open and collaborative work, both online and at events. Here are the list of current helpers. You may want to take a screenshot of this. Oh, if you take a screenshot, hold on. I will not be in it. You might want to take a screenshot of this slide for your reference. You can find us on Slack. Please DM one or more of us if you have a question, any question at all, or any concern, especially if it has to do with our code of conduct or anti-harassment policy. If you see us on a Zoom during a Connect session and you want to reach out, please use the private chat feature. And we have an email list. You can always reach one of us for helper information. We all receive those messages. That's helpers@samvera.org. More information about the helpers is on the wiki. The link is noted here. And if you want to become a helper, we welcome new volunteers. It's a great way to serve and support our community, and you learn skills that extend into the rest of your life at work, at home, and the rest of the world. We want our conference to be accessible to everyone. There are a few easy things that you can do to lower the barriers to accessing, to being accessible on Zoom. If you are hosting a Zoom session, please remember to spotlight the presenter so that others can see the speaker during the presentation. Describe the visuals that you're presenting, and finally, most importantly, share your slides publicly via the Google Drive, and please be sure to provide speaker notes so that interested readers have full access to your presentation content. As with websites, it's alt text to images in slides for those who use screen readers. Our community is growing, and there are always newcomers at the Connect meetings. Those of us who have been a while need to make newcomers feel welcome, and that is true virtually. We've all been the new person in the room, and we have the experience of information overload. So let's make a concerted effort to recognize that if someone is in a Zoom meeting and you see them becoming overwhelmed, be a helping hand. If you're new and find it difficult to insert yourself in conversations despite your best efforts, please reach out to a helper and let them know. It's not just our event leaders and facilitators who are responsible for making this a fun and welcoming participatory event. Each one of us helps set the tone for how we work and have fun together. If you experience someone dominating the conversation or being dismissive or disrespectful of others, politely let them know or seek a helper for assistance in addressing the situation. All perspectives are invited. In fact, they are needed. Everyone's expertise is valued, and everyone here is a contributor. Reminder that microaggressions are prevalent despite our best intentions to be aware of our behavior. Microaggressions and subtleisms are little things that we say or do, often without any awareness or intention, that make others feel uncomfortable, misrepresented, underrepresented, or even powerless. Subtleisms include, but are not limited to, sexism, racism, ableism, ageism, and LGBTQ discrimination and phobias. When in group discussion settings, whether in person or virtually, it's important to repeat contributions, particularly from diverse contributors, and to credit commenters so that their words and contributions are not misappropriated. We all make mistakes, and if you catch yourself doing something along these lines, it's not a big deal. Just apologize and move on. If you're new, there's probably a lot that may seem unfamiliar or unclear, and it's okay to feel a little lost or out of place. Most of us did it first. Many of us have found the best way to get over our initial discomfort is to jump in by asking questions or volunteering to help. We're an agile community working to make things better as we go, and that means everyone is qualified to help. There are no imposters here. Find a way to engage. That can be timekeeping or note-taking, whiteboarding. Share what you're passionate about in lightning talks and poster sessions, and volunteer for work groups. Most of all, we want everyone to have fun and learn new things and move Samvera forward. Thanks for your time. Good morning and welcome. My name is Jessica Hilt, and I am the manager of...
You would think that I hadn't practiced that like 13 times last night. But thank you, Jessica, for that video, and also teaching us that Zoom can overlay your image on top of slides, which I tried really hard to figure out myself, but could not. Next up, we're going to have Brian McBride introduce our keynote speaker. Brian?
Thank you, Rosie. It's my pleasure to introduce the Samvera Connect 2020 keynote speaker, Torsten Reimer. As a member of the British Library Strategic Leadership Team, the head of research services is responsible for the contemporary collections and development of our services for researchers, research organizations on-site and online. He oversees the library's content and research services, strategies, contemporary acquisitions, processing of content, including legal deposit, our approach to discovery, long-term access and use of content, as well as related scholarly infrastructures. Torsten is the library's strategic expert for scholarly communications, including open access, research data, and alternative publishing models. Torsten's academic background is in history and digital humanities. He holds a PhD in history from the University of Munich, where he founded the pioneering digital humanities and scholarly communication services. Torsten joined the British Library from the Imperial College London, where he was responsible for the scholarly communication strategy / compliance and development of open access and research data services. Previously, he was a program manager at JEST, focusing on digital infrastructure for research, and co-coordinator at National Digital Research Network based at King's College London. We invite everyone to submit any questions to Torsten via the Q&A button below. We'll try to make sure and get to everyone's questions. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce the Samvera Connect 2020 keynote speaker, Torsten Reimer.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for having me. I'm hoping that you can now all see the slides. It seems that I wasn't the only one who, when sort of putting a few thoughts together about how to introduce the day, reflected on that it is a shame that we can't all meet in person. After all, I think what I've always enjoyed about particular repository-related conferences and meetings is the buzz and the energy. And that's something that you, to a degree, but never really completely can replicate virtually. On the other hand, though, I think there's also at least a slight bit of advantage in the current situation, which is for those of you who, like on my end, is now gin o'clock or the time for any kind of refreshing beverage, I hope that you have something in front of you, whether it's a cup of tea, coffee, maybe a cocktail or something else. Partly because it's a nice thing to do, but also because some of the thoughts I want to share are a bit more on the sobering side about the future of open infrastructures and library and knowledge infrastructures more broadly. Although I hope I can balance this with some positive, more directly repository-focused experiences and comments. So I quite like to, as a historian, start in the past. In this case, it's a semi-mythical past where you could just build something and they would come. And some ways, actually, as far as libraries and other knowledge infrastructures are concerned, that has been quite true. If you, for example, look at the British Library, we built the building, and in fact, we built the building or buildings around a large library collection, and people came. And it's probably true for many libraries or other knowledge infrastructures for a while, that there was something that drew people to them and still does, which is the library collection. Many larger libraries and also some specialized libraries could be relatively confident for a long time that it's that collection in the building with advice from staff that would draw people because the collection itself was big, it was a draw. And to an extent, that is still true today, but I would argue that the library collection and content held by other kind of knowledge institutions is somewhat less of relevance today. If you sort of look at this diagram that we sometimes use internally at the British Library, I think there's a shift because there is now a lot of content beyond the content that we hold. In fact, it's probably fair to say that our collections are shrinking. Pretty much regardless how big you are, how big your repository are, your collection are shrinking in size and relevance in comparison to what else is out there in the internet. So we have to, I think, as a community, move away from the idea that we can meet our user needs purely from our own collection that will sort of address whatever they have. In fact, I would argue the value in what we hold often increasingly now lies in building links and connecting to relevant global context and other information. I think that's some of certainly a transitional challenge that many knowledge organizations face, but it goes broader in the sense that research has become digital in a level that not all organizations can truly match. It's challenging to do. And one of the areas that's particularly on my mind is the question of discovery. If all the open content lies out there and you can discover it on Google and elsewhere, do you still need a library for some things that for a long time we thought were core parts of what libraries do? Now, we have some concrete evidence of that, and that we've been running for a while a program of user research, and the slide that you see here sort of summarizes some of the things that we've learned by interviewing and running a large online panel of non-users. We learned quite a few things that are helpful for us in terms of how we position our services. I don't want to go into too much detail for this, but one thing, perhaps unsurprisingly, that came out very clearly is Google is the starting point. There will be a few others, but it's not necessarily the library. It's not the library collection. This is not something that is on the mind, certainly of members of the general public. But to a degree, I think it's also in research organizations where that's less the case, because even if it's licensed by the library, many researchers, students, and others don't really recognize that anymore. For them, it's sort of all out there online. And that means, as a wider community, we have, I think, for a while been on a journey where we switch from, certainly in the library and wider GLAM world, from a view that our collection is the answer to everything, to a paradigm that's more focused on providing services. And that is largely, I think, driven by not being any type of services, but open science services. We have seen a similar shift in other industries where, for example, the software industry is now not so much selling you software, but rather software as a service. And we've also seen for a few years now that in open science, open research paradigm, that shift has already given libraries and other knowledge institutions a new role, which is enabling our users to share research openly. And the key infrastructure in this arguably is the repository. So you could say, well, things are changing and the repositories are becoming more important, and that's good news for us as a community. And arguably it is, but some of the success that we've seen, and I'm particularly speaking from a UK perspective here, really has come from a drive for open access and research data management compliance. We've seen a lot more focus and effort that many institutions, even at the higher levels within the institutions, have now put into repositories. And really, in some cases, a remarkable change. When I joined Imperial College, there was something like 300 manuscripts of articles uploaded in the repository a year. 3 years later, with all the mandates coming in, it was something like over 10 going on to 11,000 a year. That's a huge success story for repositories, but it's arguably not necessarily driven by our users really loving the repositories. It's been largely driven by compliance. There's a small and growing number of readers and authors of scholarly content who I think have embraced repositories, but what is still at the heart for them is arguably the publication in a journal, because it gives them an added value that repositories haven't really quite managed to replicate, which is prestige. And that brings me to, I think, a key point is we should be focused on the needs of our users. Yet what we're often focused on is building systems. And we've made a lot of progress there, but arguably, if you look at many repositories and the practice of how they are run, they're not quite shiny. There is sort of, the window isn't quite working, the engine sputters a little bit to sort of stay in that picture. And things aren't always quite in the way how they should be. This is not just my view, it's also something that a couple of years ago came out fairly clearly in consultation with the repositories community that we ran in the UK. That was part of a wider open access coordination group that Universities UK ran. And we set up a working group that I was part of to advise the UK government on what could be done with repositories. And we had input from the repository community in the UK. And partly based on this input, we came up with a list of about 20 challenges that repositories struggle with. I don't want to go through all of them in detail here. I think they will be familiar to most, if not all of you, but there's a lot in there with maintaining custom functionality, concerns about the sustainability of the package, difficulties with integration, concern about preservation functionality, issues with persistent identifiers, lack of skills. Repositories are there, they are successful in a way, but they are arguably in practice often not built on a solid base as you would like them to sit on. Now, the world has moved on somewhat since we've done this, but my feeling certainly is that many, probably all of these challenges are still almost as relevant now as they were a couple of years ago. Now, the working group made a few recommendations, which I don't want to dwell on. They contained a lot about metadata and other areas and user experience. But it also said, maybe there's a way to fix this and run things more efficiently if we set up some kind of national repository solution. And I have to say, in some ways, I have a lot of sympathy for that kind of approach. Certainly, I think when all these policies came out in the UK, I thought, well, if funders mandate this, wouldn't it be easy if they just pay for a bit of infrastructure that helps us meet all of these requirements? But arguably, there are quite a few good reasons for why one should be a little bit cautious about it. There's not really been a good track record, I think, for public funders to build monolithic systems that meet all needs. And we are perhaps not quite at the point where we can with confidence say that this would be the one most suitable system. Also, I think systems have improved. It's a lot easier to exchange data and make things happen for which previously you might have wanted a national kind of solution. And then, and this will be a key point later, multi-tenancy is hard. Now, have I since I've been talking about national systems come out and say there shouldn't be any more change? No, that's, I think, not what I'm saying. I think what I would quite like to see is us making use of more platforms that are now out there where we don't have to run institutional repositories ourselves, but rather focus on the value that we can add to our users instead of all of us separately trying to keep our own repository up to scratch. And I think a lot has happened in the market over the last few years with interesting options, both in terms of software and hosting now being available. And I think if we can make progress that way and also progress towards the vision of next generation repositories, then we can probably reap quite a few of the benefits. So having thought about this for a while, I then thought, well, let's maybe see if I can, working with my team, make a bit of a difference by exploring what a repository service could be like that's not just run for one institution, but is shared. And this is the bit that will bring my talk more closely to Samvera and particularly to the Hyku flavor of it. Now, what allowed me to do this was joining the British Library, and the British Library has a strategic vision called Living Knowledge that articulates the ambition to be the most open, creative, and innovative institution of its kind in the world. As you've heard earlier, we're having two strategies, one that we've developed from scratch, one that we're refreshing, the service strategy and the content strategy. And to implement those, we're running a change management portfolio that's helpfully called Everything Available. I don't want to talk about this. This is a wider change management that also affects how we run our services in the reading rooms and so on. But part of it is the development of a repository platform. We had the issue, and we still have it to a degree, that we have a large number of sometimes homegrown, elderly platforms that are not quite doing what they should. One example is Ethos, the National eThesis repository. It's really one of our most successful services, but it runs on quite aging bit of technology, and there are a few others. And we thought, instead of replacing all of them separately, wouldn't it be nice if we had a single sort of layered level of repository services on which we could set up different access repositories on the same software, built into some of the services that we offer, such as digitization, and then backed up by a preservation layer, which, as it so happens, we're also currently redeveloping, refreshing the system that's used for looking after the National Library collection that we share with other libraries in the UK. And as we thought about doing this, we talked to some of our partners, and they said, well, if you're developing something like this, maybe our repository could also find a home on that platform. So we had a few partners. We had the need to refresh our own systems, but we also felt that we weren't best placed to develop a repository. So we started a procurement process, and we then appointed Ubiquity Press, who just started moving into offering repository services as our technical partner. We choose as a platform a Ubiquity suggestion, Samvera Hyku, which in this slide sort of briefly described as an open source turnkey repository application that's inherently multi-tenancy. It's based on Hyrax. I would imagine that those of you in the community who've been around for a while will be relatively familiar with Hyrax. And Hyku, or based on it, has really been designed to address the issue of multi-tenancy on running separate repositories on the same installation. That's what it made it attractive for us. So we went on with our partners at Ubiquity Press in working in sprints to implement this and a constant feedback loop from our partners who were involved. So our partners in this case were large organizations that are similar to the British Library in that they are cultural sector organizations in the UK, but usually working internationally, who, amongst other things, like ourselves, conduct our own research. The British Library has several million a year in research income. We are on a large set of diverse research projects, and so do many of the others, which means our staff publish research publications, and therefore we need an institutional repository amongst other needs. So we got together with our 5 partners and set out to work. And we've recently launched the shared research repository. What you can see here, and I'm not going to do a full demo, just quickly sort of flashing this up, is the landing page from which you can access all these separate repositories, but you can also search across all of them, and that's what makes it a shared research repository for cultural and heritage organizations, with the view that getting all our content together would be more attractive for users than just having our content sit on separate systems. Each organization has its own repository with its own branding. And the screenshot here, you can see some of the content that you can find when you search for repository on the British Library's repository. That might perhaps be something that you'd be interested in. And right at the bottom, you will see the architecture review for the Advancing Hyku project that I'll come down to. So this functions as separate repositories, but we also have a shared layer where we all come together with our content. Now, having now launched this as a pilot, what are we going to do with it? In the first instance, we are currently finishing a procurement for the next phase of partnership of hosting and developing it. We're really keen to build better digital preservation capability into the shared repository platform. And we're thinking about a whole other host of advancements that we want to build in. And we're also interested in broadening the scope, and we have in fact been approached by a few organizations that aren't UK cultural sector bodies. So we are open and working up with others, seeing whether there are needs for single repositories, other shared repository clusters, or whichever use case we can help supporting by working in partnership with others. So as a quick note from the sponsor, if this is something you find interesting, then ping us a message at openaccess@bl.uk. But back to what I'm hoping you all will be immediately more interested in. What did we learn? Quite a few things, and arguably many of them aren't perhaps always that surprising. We set up a new team. Our colleagues at Ubiquity just did the same, and that meant there was a lot of energy and excitement in there. But also, I think we both had to learn how to become more mature in what is a larger development project than we were maybe used to do in this context. And what for us has been really critical, I think, is bringing in an experienced project manager and really sort of treat this seriously. What's also a bit of a challenge is that dreaded word multi-tenancy, because different people mean different things about it. So for us, being really clear what we wanted to drive on and keep that energy and plan things carefully has been crucial. What we haven't quite cracked yet is developing a business model that balances sustainability and affordability, particularly when you work with partners who have a small budget. We now have a business model, which we'll need to adjust based on how our procurement process goes. But if you're a small organization with not much content, striking that balance isn't easy, because there is a certain fixed cost that you need for running a repository, and we're doing what we can to bring that down to help bring organizations in who maybe otherwise couldn't afford their own repository. We also had really good help from the community, and I would like to give a quick shout out to the Palni and Palsy consortia in the US, who are also developing Hyku, and I think the teams really benefited from this. So it took us a lot of drive to get there, but I think we got quite a bit done. But we also learned quite a bit more about Hyku, in particular about the turnkey. What you see here is lots of enhancements that we've made. In particular around persistent identifiers. And our view, certainly with the version of Hyku that we worked, was that it needs quite a bit more work before it really becomes turnkey. What really surprised me, I think, it was relatively quick to set it up and fairly easy to set up new repositories. Once some basic configuration was done, there was almost a matter of seconds. Yet on the other hand, lots of things that I sort of expected would maybe work better out of the box weren't quite there. For example, metadata work types. But we've made quite a bit of progress. All the code that's been developed is available open source through Ubiquity's GitHub repository. And we're now making effort to feeding as much of that back into the community. And that, in a way, is probably one of my biggest regrets about the project, that we haven't found a better way to match a really, really fast development turnaround, feeding things back into the community. So we have a bit of catching up to do, but we hope that that work, that effort that we've put in will not just be available in general, but really fully integrated into the latest versions of Hyku. Now, what have we learned about Hyku? Hyku's definitely grown up quite a bit in the time that we've worked with it. It allowed us to achieve what we set out to do. And the community is growing around it, which is good. But it's still, I think, quite heavily focused geographically on the US and the UK. So we'd like to see that grow and invite and bring more people into the community also so that we can widen the governance. We found that multi-tenancy is actually really easy to set up or not. It depends a bit on what you mean by it and how you want to implement it. And I think also it wasn't always as easy to pull some of the exciting Hierarchs developments into Hyku as we assumed. And one area that I think particularly could do with a bit more attention is the user interface and make it look more exciting. And finally, linking it into what has been a key of the repository success, which is helping universities to meet compliance target and linking into reporting systems and so on. That's a key thing, I think, that the more we can add, the more success I think Hyku is going to have. Now, thankfully, we have been given $1 million from the Arcadia Foundation. We, in this case, means the University of Virginia Libraries, Ubiquity Press, and the British Library, to advance Hyku in a project that's called Advancing Hyku, and build many of these things that I've just talked about into it, at least make progress to it. I don't want to say too much about it because you will hear more about this at the conference later. I've included the link here, but just to say this is, at least as far as the British Library contribution in particular is concerned, built around an architectural analysis that we've done that's available from the repository and that focuses on things that we need, including scalability, portability, and so on. One thing that particularly struck me, and I'm not quite sure how far this has been addressed in the latest version of Hyku, we came in with version 1, is that to my surprise, we learned that Hyku is actually not storing data that you load into it, publications, whatever it may be, sort of separate, but rather that in binary form, they go into the database, which is something that I'm an early modern historian. I want things to last at least 500 years because that's what my research did. And the idea to, if a system keels over, having to pull the content that's in binary form in a database out, instead of just having it sitting there somewhere nicely, it's always made me a bit nervous. There are workarounds to do this. But if there's work on the way at the moment in addressing some of this and you know about it, then ping me a message after the talk, because then my weekend will, I think, be more relaxing, one of these concerns that I can take off. It is a really exciting package of software, I think, but there is quite a bit that we can do in the community to make it more useful. Now, we have the boost of compliance. We work a lot to make our systems more useful, and there is a lot more available now than there was a few years ago. So we should all be set for a great success story. In some ways we are, but I think there are some challenges that we face as the wider community if we look sort of about 10 years ahead. And I think one challenge in a way could possibly arise from success. So I would assume that by 2030, that long debate about open access, is it a good thing, how to achieve it, should largely be open. That arguably is something that many in the community have fought for perhaps all our careers long, and it's something quite exciting to look forward to, but it will have some interesting consequences, I think, for some of the organizations and the infrastructures. You might think, oh, this is terrific. We've succeeded and all will be well, and it might be, but it's quite possible that what we do and how we do it in there will change quite a lot. I firmly believe if we go to a model where everything is published open access, we shouldn't just replicate the model that we currently have published in a journal and then put into a repository. And arguably, we are seeing some movements that move, you could argue, away from the institutional repository. Wellcome, probably the leading funder when it comes to open access, has a while ago started Wellcome Open Research, where they publish content directly. And I'm increasingly wondering, isn't this something that other funders might also consider? isn't there something where we might not sort of want to break publishing into different aspects, but see if there isn't an easier, more intuitive way for our users to do this? But if that happens, it's possible that the local repository will become a lot less important. And similarly, we see other services such as Unpaywall, service that I think many of us will use and like. But this is one of the other developments that shows the more their content is open, the more there will be innovators who do new things that maybe we as institutions can't always follow, and the users will go to them and experience our content through them. And that leads into a wider point. I think 15 years ago, you could feasibly go in and knock together your own repository for some basic work. And you can still sort of do this to an extent now, but our users are now expecting a level of user experience that's very difficult for many institutions, even bigger ones, to match. So will we really be most well placed as a community to develop these open science services? Or will there be others? And what does this mean for our role in supporting open science if we can't develop and perhaps even host the technical infrastructures on which it is based? Another interesting thought in that sense is persistent identifiers, so the likes of ORCID, Crossref, DataCite, DOIs. We're thinking quite a lot about this at the British Library for a host of reasons. One is that we are working in the EU-funded Freya project that brings many of the persistent identifier providers together. And arguably, persistent identifiers are really what we need in the repository community. But if you think them through to the point where everything has all the right persistent identifiers, then we'll see a shift in the value of infrastructures. Currently, you can hold pretty much all the data and metadata that you need in your own repository. But the more persistent identifiers there are, the more value will come from it being linked into real time into the systems of these persistent identifier providers, because you can sort of build that knowledge web, that knowledge graph in real terms, which means your local collection of your data will become increasingly meaningless on its own. You rather need what lives somewhere online and lives in the cloud. What we also need to do, though, is in some ways stop thinking about user interfaces for people, but to connecting all these things, we will have to develop more and better user interfaces for software. That's a skill that not all of us have, but it also means that if our infrastructures don't serve our content directly to our users, but indirectly, even if we have the shiniest APIs, we'll become more and more invisible. And that might be a good thing from the user perspective, but it's challenging, I think, if we need to run some services that we find harder to justify because they are invisible. And interestingly, there's another development that will bring many benefits, which is artificial intelligence. But it will also bring many problems, because if we don't have the resource to engage with machine learning, and we have to buy these services in from, say, commercial companies who are running closed services, we don't know how these algorithms work. We don't know what biases are there, who they are biased against or for. And arguably, a key thing about repositories, libraries, and knowledge infrastructures is trust. And I think as more and more of these services move into the cloud and are hosted by others who develop this shiny user experience and who have these fantastic features that we can't replicate, the more we are in danger of losing that trust, because these algorithms will have bias. But if we don't understand them, we can't mitigate against the problems that that brings with it. And interestingly, if you look around, I've sort of a while ago taking the screenshot from Elsevier, you would have thought Elsevier described themselves as a publisher, but they're not doing this anymore. A little while ago, they described themselves as a global information analytics business. Now it's maybe something slightly different. Elsevier isn't unique in this, but we might arguably see that while some of us will have hoped for a shift, and maybe some of the big companies not being also overpowerful in an open science world, we might find that the same organizations that we currently pay to publish our content will later on pay them for the analytics services that they use, but we will perhaps be even more dependent because we understand how subscriptions work. We don't understand how these algorithms work. So how might this new paradigm work out? Well, we could very well see further market concentration that tends to happen in a digital world. Fewer service provider. Our role as institutions providing services on a technical side may be less than what is now. We're probably not going to run our own services, we'll procure our services. So procuring and developing, very different skill set. And we might not actually own our information in the sense that it lives out there in the cloud. We might not be the space where people perhaps go to for discovery and access. And also some of the content management will happen externally. And there's a risk, I think, that our repositories that open their content freely might disappear behind shiny commercial discovery layers that we can't control. And with constant pressure on budgets, it's possible that we'll have fewer staff, but we'll need more highly skilled staff to be able to engage in this environment. And managing that transition is a challenge. Now, having spoken about challenges, I want to wrap up with a few things that are currently happening or that we could do to see that my sometimes slightly dystopian vision is not going to come to pass. Briefly, I want to flag up something that we've just developed in the UK. It's called a Digital Shift Manifesto. It's been set up by a working group for Research Libraries UK, which I had the pleasure to chair, and now sort of chairing the implementation group. We've articulated what we want research libraries to be. I'm not going to talk through this in much detail, but openness, sustainability, being recognized partners, and running diverse, ethically sound service is right at the heart of this. And we recognize that to be able to do this, we need to improve the skills. So we have an implementation plan for what the UK research libraries want to do. I've just taken a snapshot of some of the midterm objectives because I want to highlight one piece of work. It's right at the bottom, and that's something that I want to take a lead on and would like to invite others, which is, I think we need some kind of manifesto or set of requirements that we use for procurement that make sure that whatever systems we buy in help with our goal for openness, transparency, and trust. And so coming to an end, a few things that I would like to postulate we should all do. We should stop thinking so much in systems terms, but rather thinking in terms of the service that we want to deliver and the user value that will come along. I think we should do our best to stop customizing and forking our systems to death, because otherwise we'll again at some point end up in this dilemma that many of us are in. Certainly we are for some services at the British Library. Some things become so customized that updating it to the latest version that would be really helpful, it's just become too expensive. Similarly, I think we should focus on what our core business is as knowledge organizations, which is running the services for our users, and work together in the way that there are some organizations who are really good at developing or hosting in the community, and others who have other strengths. And I would always ask myself, are we best placed to develop something, or is there someone else? But whatever we develop, we should make sure that the user is at the heart of it and that we have an engaging user experience, that we set our workflows so up that we can give credit to all the open sources that we use to make them visible to our users. We should all rally around open community infrastructures because they are critical. I think we should develop some kind of principle for how we run procurement. And in particular, we need to be absolutely mindful that we don't leave artificial intelligence to black box machines that we can't control, because there will be negative consequences. And finally, certainly from our experience, I say, have a look at Hyku. And with that, I would like to close. And if there are any questions, I think we should have a few minutes.
Thank you, Torsten, for that excellent presentation. It's really thought-provoking. We do have one question from the audience. How will this digital landscape protect the privacy of users, and what can we do now?
That's a very complicated question, I think. In some ways, privacy of users is maybe not my #1 concern, in that the open content is normally intended by the users to be made openly available, and academics normally want to be found. Still, I think we have to make sure that we give them choices and be very transparent about what information we collect from them. I think that is critical. They might not use it, but I think we have a responsibility to give them that choice. The other part that we have to think very carefully about is unintended consequences. You might have an anonymized data set, someone else will have one, but if you throw them together and you have the right algorithms, you can suddenly work out who is who in that data set. That's something that I think we as a library community alone can't solve, but we should work very closely with researchers across the world who are looking into data analytics and others to understand what we can do for data sharing and how we can advise users in our organizations what they need to keep in mind, because just because your data set is anonymized does not mean that if you throw it in the internet, it will stay that way. That's, I think, a quick response, but I appreciate I haven't really done this full justice.
Thank you. Another question. What do you see as the major challenges for libraries to adopt open source infrastructure versus commercial infrastructure?
Well, a key thing is the commercial infrastructure will often come in a way that's easier to consume and may look shinier, easier to sell. I mean, I've seen cases in universities where a commercial vendor came, demonstrated to the university leadership, it all looked very good, a contract was signed, and the library wasn't involved. The library could have pointed out that there might be a better alternative. And by the way, to be clear, I don't want to come across as saying I dislike commercial providers. I absolutely don't. We work with quite a few of them. I'd like them to work openly. So I think what we need to do is we need to nourish those in the community who deliver services based on open source, because not every institution can run their own. And we should strengthen community-based service providers or any commercial entity that provides services. I think a lot of how we can do this is through writing this into procurement, but we also need to raise awareness with, say, university leaderships and those who make the decisions inside and outside of libraries, why we want openness and what it's good for, and where it's really important to fight for a level of openness.
Thank you. If anybody has any other questions they want to submit, we've got 3 more minutes. Wait a second. I have one question if there's nothing else. All right. So one question I have is, many academic libraries in the US are decentralized. What advice and suggestions would you provide organizations with limited budgets and to help better coordinate projects with members in the community?
I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, in the sense that it always sounds very good. We'll just do a community project, but community projects need a lot of work. And I think for ours in particular, would like to credit the repository team at the British Library, because developing a shared project is often also a hand-holding project where you maybe need to bring others along who aren't quite as advanced as you, or you might want to slow down a few who are too advanced for the community. So community projects will need a level of effort. I don't think there's any way of getting around it. What I found key is be clear what your challenge is, and then see what other institutions might have a similar challenge. They might not necessarily be the next door institution that you talk to. They might be further away, but arguably that's less of a hindrance at the moment. So I would try and find, for particular problems, others that have a similar challenge and urgent pressure. And another experience that I've made with community projects is some community projects take a lot of time of defining membership and thinking about what criteria do we have. I've always found the most important criterion for picking others to come into a community is, are they willing and able to contribute something? So planning is really important. Plan what you want, but maybe don't plan too much about how you will organize your community, and rather find people who have a similar problem and who are willing and able to contribute. That's, I think, the best advice I can give in a minute.
Thank you, Torsten. Again, we have 1 more minute if there's any other questions. All right. Torsten, want to extend my thanks and the thanks of the Samvera community for taking time today to present to us. It's a wonderful presentation, and just want to extend my gratitude and thanks.
Not at all. I'd like to say thank you very much for having me. And also, I think in general, we couldn't have done our shared research repository if there hadn't been people working on all these bits for months, years in their careers. So thank you all for the effort that went into that, helped us launch this. And I'm hoping that we can keep playing an active and hopefully also more active role in advancing our common goals. So thank you very much for having me, and look forward to an exciting conference.
Okay. Thank you, Torsten. So up next is we have a short 10-minute break. So if everyone will be back in just 9 minutes. So we have a great presentations coming up next. See everybody in 10. Welcome back, everyone, to Samvera Connect 2020 online. Next up, we have the Welcome to Samvera's new community manager with Carolyn Kesey and Heather Greer-Klein.
Hi, everyone. Y'all can hear me, right?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm Carolyn. My last name is Casey. I'm the head of the repository and digital curation department at Northwestern University Libraries. And following suit, as some of my colleagues, I am a white female in my 40s. I have dark, shortish, curly hair, and I'm wearing a purple sweater. I also have some fabulous earrings and a necklace on too. So I'm here to introduce, and I'm really, really happy about this. I'm here to introduce Heather. Heather is our new Samvera community manager. She joins us from Lyrasis, where she has served in a number of roles, including outreach and engagement coordinator for digital technology services. She had a stint as a DSpace 7 release manager, and she previously was the DuraSpace services coordinator. Prior to both DuraSpace and Lyrasis, Heather was the member services coordinator at the North Carolina Live Consortium. So Heather and I have a little bit of a fun thing to introduce her. But before I do, Heather, do you want to add to your quick bio at all?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Carolyn. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather. I am a white woman in my 30s with purple glasses and very short curly hair and a blue sweater. The only thing I would add that's pretty relevant to what brought me to the Samvera community is I got first involved with the Samvera community when I was at DuraSpace, and I was the hosted service pilot manager for the Hydra in a Box project, which is what became Hyku. So I really, really enjoyed that time, and I'm thrilled to be in my role and helping move the community forward.
Thanks for adding. I have a question for you, Heather. Will you play this game with me?
Yes.
Awesome. We like consent. What places have you called home?
So I grew up in rural central Ohio, near Kenyon College, for anyone who's an Ohioan. So I called that home for the first 18 years of my life. And then I moved to Boston for both undergrad and graduate school. That's where I met my spouse. They're a native Bostonian, grew up in West Roxbury. So I was there for about 10 years, and then we decided to move to North Carolina. And I moved a couple different places in North Carolina, but have been settled here where I now live and work in Durham, North Carolina, in the US Eastern Time Zone. And I've been here now for, I think, about a little over 10 years.
You're getting into the double digits. Haven't left yet, huh?
I love it.
Awesome. My next question for you is, what's your favorite way to unwind?
That's a great question. So I'm a big gardener. It's one thing I love about North Carolina is having really great growing season. I'm into permaculture, so blueberries and fruit trees, and I'm also a big pollinator gardener, and I'm trying to start a meadow in one corner of my backyard for pollinators. So that's a big way for me to unwind. I like getting outside and getting in the dirt. And since COVID started, so I used to be a big board gamer and tabletop gamer and was part of a lot of groups here in the Triangle. But I find doing that over Zoom to be kind of challenging, can't do it as often as I used to. So I'm getting back into video games. And that has been a great way to just, you know, live in another world briefly and unwind.
It's a good coping strategy right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Let's see. We do have a few minutes. So I like this one. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
So I have both cats and dogs. So I have two cats, Tango and Floof. Floof sometimes jumps on my keyboard and you see her fluffy tail go by. And Tango spends most of the day here behind me. I don't know if you can.
Oh, yeah.
There he is.
Mhm.
He's basically a pillow back there behind me. But I also have a retired racing greyhound, Derby. He's 10 years old and he's kind of a big cat himself. So probably lean cat person, but I do especially love beagles and greyhounds.
Oh. Every time I see a greyhound, they're so elegant looking, and I've heard they are the laziest creatures on earth. So
True.
Yeah, which makes it sad that we race them sometimes. Or used to. What book are you reading now? This is a good one too.
Yes. So one book that I'm almost finished with that Rosalind suggested to me and then I love and then I want to suggest to everyone, I have it right here on my desk, is called Working in Public, The Making and Maintenance of Open Source Software by Nadia Egbal. It's very beautiful.
Oh, cool.
And it is not a dry read. It is a pretty interesting and well-written and compelling read. I love it. And then I just started a novel, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. So I'm looking forward to probably tearing through that this weekend.
Nice. I just finished one of her books too. It's 11:26. I'm thinking maybe we'll do one more question and then you can tell everyone about your plans for how you're starting your job and how it's going. What is the worst job that you've ever had?
Oh, so I think the worst job that I've ever had is when I was had just graduated from undergrad and was living in Boston in Jamaica Plain and started working at a temp agency and got assigned a long-term temp assignment in downtown Boston at a venture capital firm. And I thought I was just going to be sort of a general admin. And they were told that they were getting someone with an accounting degree. I have a sociology degree. It's my undergraduate degree, not an accounting degree. And the folks who worked there talked to me so infrequently and just sort of left me on my own. So much that it took more than 3 weeks for us to realize the mismatch because I just kept trying to do what they were asking me to do. And it was a very intense. It was a good lesson in imposter syndrome though, because it was a moment where I was like, oh no, I'm literally an imposter. So
awesome.
That wasn't fun as a 22-year-old, but it was a good lesson in recognizing fit that I ended up being grateful for in the long run.
Nice. That's a great story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your plan for the job right now?
Yeah, sure. So the job one right now is knowledge transfer from Richard Green, who's been wonderful. Sort of getting a handle on administratively everything that we need to do for the community, and just learning everything that Richard knows and has done. I'm also working really closely with all the working groups and interest groups. I know from my interview that a big part of my role is to sort of be the connector between everything that's happening in the community, trying to find areas of overlap and places where folks can work together. And I'm also really looking forward to writing a communication plan and sort of consolidating and finding a way to very easily get out, particularly all the things that we want to ask folks in the community to do. Sometimes those things can get lost. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that. But I will also be working closely with steering and sort of I have many, many ideas, and I've heard many ideas from others, and it's just a matter of prioritizing it and moving forward. But I'm super, super excited to be here.
I think I can speak for most people. We're really, really happy you're here. And thank you for playing along and letting me introduce you to the community in this way. So
thank you.
Yay, Samvera. Have a great connect, everyone.
My haiku cup.
Thank you, Carolyn and Heather, and great cup. I'm glad those turned out well. Next up on today's agenda is welcome the state of the Samvera community, and Rosalind will take it from here.
Hello, everybody. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to find where everybody went. I guess there's nobody here for me to see but myself. Hello, and for those of you that weren't at the welcome session, my name is Rosalind Metz, and I'm the current chair of Samvera Steering. I'm a white female in my 40s with long brown hair, wearing a black jacket in front of a blue wall with a window off to the side. I'll be honest, somebody has actually said I look like I'm being interviewed in an episode of The Office. I apologize to people who actually meet with me because you will never be able to unsee that. For this portion of the program, I'll be reviewing the state of Samvera. I'll provide a brief overview of the community, talk about the current state of the community's work, and then end the program with a recap of the state of the software. So I'm going to start with an overview of the community. I just want to make sure I have chat up and just in case. This past year, we spent significant time focusing inward on the community, strengthening and clarifying the community's relationship with partners. To date, we have 33 partners, around 60 adopters, a little over 1,000 Slack members, and 16 active working and interest groups. While the number of partners has actually gone down from last year, many of those partners were actually inactive in the community, and their formal withdrawal from partnership was partially spurred by our new contribution model. As I just stated, we spent quite a bit of time strengthening and clarifying the community's relationships with partners. That focus on the community harkens us back to the beginnings of Samvera, in which our founders envisioned us really focusing on the community rather than just the technology. While we often have partner institutions that adopt different perspectives on how to use the technology that falls under the Samvera umbrella, what continues to bring us together is the community our founders created. That community is on display here at Samvera Connect. This year, it is thriving. We have over 300 unique attendees registered for the various presentations and events being held over the next week. Our attendees span over 60 organizations, 10 countries, and 4 continents. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has helped to make this event happen. And this success in coming together as a community mirrors the success we saw at Samvera Virtual Connect held in May of 2020. There were 185 unique attendees over the course of 2 days at that event. And I just want to take a moment to thank the Samvera Virtual Connect planners, Franny, David, John, James, Kevin, and Michael Klein, no relation to Heather Klein as far as they know. Part of what makes us so successful as a community is our working and interest groups. For those of you that aren't familiar with our working and interest group framework, it was developed to provide a lightweight way of creating groups to accomplish work or come together to discuss shared experiences. Criteria for creating interest in working groups are listed on the wiki, and we encourage folks to engage in existing groups or develop new ones if the need arises. A number of those interest in working groups will be reporting out during our Monday program. I'd like to invite everyone to attend, learn about the important work of these groups, and perhaps find a group you would like to get involved in. In addition, please take a few moments to check in on our other active working and interest groups. You can view their charges, meeting minutes, and their meeting schedules on the wiki. Next, I want to take a moment to introduce Samvera Steering to everyone. This is our first year with a fully elected steering body. While we will miss John Dunn, Robin, and Chris, who have rolled off this year, we are excited to have Kevin Kocianski, Esme Coles, Brian McBride, and Alicia Morris join the existing steering members, John Weiss, Simeon Warner, Hannah Frost, and myself. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to the members of steering, and we will do our best to answer your questions or put you in touch with someone who can. Something else that makes the Samvera community different is our fantastic partners that identify as service providers. I just want to thank CoSector, DCE, Notch 8, and Ubiquity for helping to make this community strong. Finally, I'd like to encourage everyone here to consider engaging with the community. Join a working group, engage with our service providers, or attend one of our events. So I'm going to move on now to the state of the community. As I mentioned previously this year, we implemented a contribution model for the community. This contribution model is a tiered model based on the size of the institution or service provider. More importantly, this contribution model provides us with a stable income to assist with hiring staff for the community. This year, we raised over $187,000 to help support the hiring of a community manager. This is an increase of $24,000 over the last year. This next slide provides a picture into the community's finances. We carried over a cash balance of $320,000 from last year. Our operating expenses this year were $58,000, which also included contracting with Richard, who's our operations advisor. Add to that our cash in hand from fundraising, and the community currently has $435,000 cash balance as of September 2022. The cash available to us today will allow us to pay for the day-to-day operations of the community and the new community manager's salary for the next 2.5 years. From a financial standpoint, the community is secure. Moving on from my financial picture, I'd like to talk about the governance recommendations themselves. Last year at Connect, there were 3 governance recommendations that had yet to be implemented. They were: the partners will develop a contribution model, steering will hire centralized staff, and partners will assess governance at the end of 2020. As I mentioned, what feels like a million times at this point, this year we implemented a contribution model. This model was essential to providing a predictable income stream, which in turn has helped us implement the next governance recommendation, which is, of course, hiring centralized staff. Hopefully you were able to attend the last session with Carolyn hosted with our new Samvera community manager, Heather. If you haven't met Heather yet, I encourage you to reach out to her. She's more than eager to hear about the needs of our community. Last week at the partner meeting, Jeremy Friesen presented on the work of the hiring committee. We had an incredible pool of candidates. We had over 131 applications, and the vast majority of applicants were actually qualified for the position. As you can see from the table on the right, we had a really aggressive timeline, but with Carolyn's capable leadership, our hardworking committee members, John Dunn, Jeremy, Richard, Brian McBride, and Carla Ash Hutchinson from Emory HR, we were able to hire Heather in time for this conference. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the various community members who helped us with this process. They are too numerous to mention here, but we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to assist us with this really important work. The final recommendation we needed to work on was assessing the governance model the community had put in place. There were a number of ways that we had gone about this. First, Carolyn did an assessment of the community using the It Takes a Village framework developed at Lyrasis. As you can see from this chart, respondents from the community felt we were fairly stable in our technology, but we were growing in the areas of governance, resources, and community engagement. Our focus on these areas helps to understand some of the data I have presented up to this point, but also helps to better understand some of the data I will of the software. If you're interested in learning more about the It Takes a Village framework, I've provided a link here for reference. Sorry, everyone, that's Noli. I have a menagerie in my house today. I'll just tell you all. There's actually a chipmunk running loose in my house. The cat who may appear in the window behind me at some point brought it in, and it is roaming free. So, you know, it's a zoo here, literally. In addition to Carolyn's assessment, we also had a small group assess the progress of the governance recommendations. That small group included Chris, our Brian McBride, Esme Coles, and Richard Green and Margaret Mellinger. This report indicated some questions and concerns around governance. To further unearth these issues, a survey was recently released that attempts to dig deeper into these issues. If you are so inclined, the survey is still open and you can provide feedback via this link. The hope is that now that Heather is on board, these two efforts will help to provide a roadmap to how we can continue to improve upon the extensive work the community has undertaken over the last few years. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about looking ahead, some of the work that we'll need to do over the next year or more. In July of 2020, Samvera Steering renegotiated our MOU with Lyrasis. At that time, Lyrasis asked us to consider becoming a formal open source project underneath their umbrella, or to identify what was next for the community. Over the next 9 months, Steering and our community manager will lead the community in discussions that will help us identify how we move forward and what the implications of a decision are for the community. Additionally, there is still the matter of hiring a technical coordinator role. In the assessment report I mentioned in a previous slide, one of the things surfaced was whether or not there was a need for a technical coordinator role. I found that actually really interesting and wasn't something that I expected to hear. So we'll want to dig into this a little bit further. In addition to questioning the need for a technical coordinator, the membership also expressed concerns over our membership model and whether or not that could sustain both roles. If we do choose to move forward with a technical coordinator, we'll likely need to identify further revenue streams to help sustain this role. And then, of course, there is the business of hiring a technical coordinator. I think that provides a good segue into the state of the software. This was our requisite slide that shows how the community software has developed over the years. This data is pulled from openhub.net, and I encourage you to go there yourself and explore the metrics about our software. But I'd like to dive a bit deeper if you'll let me. Previously, I mentioned that our It Takes a Village assessment labeled the technology as stable but not static. From this slide, you can see that our number of contributors to the Samvera GitHub organization has recently taken a downturn. So not the number overall, but the number over the last year. While at first glance, this may be concerning, fewer contributors over the last year does correspond with the notion that we have stable software. Again, this notion of stable software is supported by the number of commits. But if you've looked into the It Takes a Village assessment, you know that these processes are cyclical. And you can actually sort of see that in the numbers here. I suspect that much of this work will pick up in the next couple of years. A lot of this development work has been spurred on by a number of community development efforts. I've listed them here, and I want to thank everyone that has contributed to those over the past year. We appreciate the work that you do. So I've listed the Valkyrization of Hyrax, Project Surfliner, the Contribution Model Working Group sprints, and Polar Vortex. I would like to apologize. Thank you, Jeremy. Oh, and Solar Vortex. Right. Well, oh, right. Here you go. Additionally, I want to make sure that folks are aware that November 16th through 18th, Samvera will be holding a Dev Congress. You can find more information about that at the URL on this slide. And And a big thanks to the planning committee made up of Anna, Jeremy, Trey, Kate, Lynette, and Adam. Next, I want to call out some of our software's key support systems. They are the Hyku interest group, the component maintenance working group, the roadmap alignment group, and the HYRAC interest group. I want to give a big shout out to the individuals on these groups and to everyone who takes the time to ensure the community software delivers value to the community. So you can see here, this is a list of everybody on those different groups, and those people who have a star next to their name actually participate in multiple groups. There it is again. Once I finish up here, I'm sure you're asking yourself, will I ever finish? Because that dog barking is just going on and on. We'll have a number of presentations on Hyrax, Valkyrie, Avalon, and Hyku, so please stick around for those sessions. Finally, aren't you glad I'm using that word? I want to talk a little bit about the grants that are driving current development. The University of Oregon Libraries, in partnership with Oregon State, were awarded a $200,000 IMLS National Leadership Grant to support its project, Open Impact Developing Robust Analytics for Open Source Solution Bundle Hyrax. This one-year project grant addresses the development of a suite of applications and reporting tools for Hyrax, an open source Samvera-powered repository front end. We also have the Advancing Hyku collaborative project, which Torsten spoke about. That project supports the growth of open access through institutional repositories by introducing significant structural improvements and new features to Hyku. The project partners are University of Virginia Library, Ubiquity Press, and the British Library, with funding from Arcadia, a charitable fund of philanthropists Lisbeth Rousing and Peter Baldwin. The project will design and implement specific advances to the open source community repository product Hyku. The project runs October 2019 through August 2021. Finally, we have the Pennsylvania Academic Library Consortium, Inc., or PALCI, in full partnership with the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana, PALINET, representing 24 academic libraries in Indiana, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia, and New York. They were awarded a $130,000 IMLS National Leadership Grant to fund a 12-month infrastructures and initiative project to explore, develop, and pilot a Hyku-based open source, multi-tenant consortial institutional repository that will deliver ultra-low-cost hosting, discovery, and access to digital material. From the very beginning, Samvera has been a self-organized, self-funded, and sustainable project. Partners join the effort because it helps them achieve their local priorities, not because they are chasing after grant money. For Samvera, this is key. The community's software survives and thrives based on contributions from partners. That is not to say that grants don't play a role in the Samvera community. As you can see from the previous slide, many of our partners and adopters utilize grants to help them achieve their goals. If you are interested in including Samvera in a proposal for a grant, please email the Samvera steering group at steering@samvera.org or reach out directly to Heather, our new community manager. We can help you with everything from plugging you into the right working group to writing a letter of support for your grant. If you are in receipt of a Samvera related grant that is not listed on our wiki, we encourage you to add the details there. This page in particular that I've linked to helps us keep track of how the community is growing. So finally for real this time, I want to thank you all for all that you do, and please keep up the amazing work. And now I'm going to hand it over to the amazing Julie Hardesty to provide an update on Hyrax.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Can hear you.
All right, let me share my screen. And all right, are you seeing my slides?
We're seeing the slides.
Great, thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Hardesty. I'm a metadata analyst at Indiana University. And to give visual context that we're doing, I'm a white female in my 40s with long brown hair, wearing a black shirt and a gray sweater, and I'm sitting in a big room with green walls. So I am going to give the Hyrax update. And I also want to acknowledge that I am speaking to you today from the indigenous homelands of the Miami, the Delaware, the Potawatomi, and the Shawnee people. I want to honor the communities native to this region in Indiana and recognize that Indiana University is built on these homelands and resources. And these people are the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. So to start off, I'm going to do a little intro on what is Hyrax. So if you're new to the community and Samvera Connect, welcome. We are glad that you're here. Hyrax is a front end based on the Samvera framework. It provides a user interface for common repository features. So it offers the ability to create repository object types on demand, deposit content via multiple configurable workflows, and describe content with flexible metadata. Several optional features can be turned on in an administrative dashboard or added through plugins. And it's implemented as a Rails engine. So it may be the base of or added to a Rails application. Along with that, there are branding abilities that are available. It incorporates blacklight for search and discovery and enables AAAF for digital object viewing. So there is a site that has information available on that about Hyrax, hyrax.samvera.org, and the little green circle with the white Hyrax face is the logo that we have for Hyrax. In addition, there's a demonstration site that is available and is being hosted right now by Data Curation Experts, DCE, and that's available at newrax.curationexperts.com. And this is, you can actually go to this site and try searching for things that are there. You can sign up for an account and see what the administration dashboard looks like, create a collection, add a work, and try things out. And at this point, I think what the site is showing is the release candidate for the release that is being prepared to come out soon. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. And another thing that I want to share is the code base that exists on GitHub. It's under the Samvera GitHub area, and it's called Hyrax. And the current stable release that is available is Hyrax 2.9, just to kind of situate you in the numbers. And now I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to go into a little bit about what the Hyrax product owner is supposed to do, and I'm going to do this because we've actually been without a Hyrax product owner for a while. It's been like a year and a half or 2 years. It's been a bit, and development work has been continuing, but there has been no product owner in that role. And in that time, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about what the Hyrax product owner should do and can reasonably manage. And a lot of that is because it is a volunteer role from within the community. So the responsibilities that I have listed here are actually from the call that was put out earlier this year for the Hyrax product owner. And the things that we're seeing the Hyrax product owner taking on are organizing and setting priorities for Hyrax development. And a lot of that involves working with the Hyrax maintenance working group, which is led by Tom Johnson, the technical lead, and developers that are working from within the community as part of that working group. And it also involves figuring out a roadmap for Hyrax, where Hyrax as a software application is heading next, and the roadmap's alignment group that looks at not only Hyrax but other areas of the Samvera community and roadmap development as a whole for the community. Hyrax is one of those things that is taken into account with the roadmaps alignment group. So that also the product owner for Hyrax is also working with that group in a big way. So in addition to that, the product owner for Hyrax is chairing the Hyrax interest group, and that is a group that is somewhat reformulated from what it was previously. It was more about advising the roadmap group. And now it is envisioned to be more of an interest group like the other interest groups within the community. So monthly meetings, if there's interest, if you have an interest in catching up on what is happening with Hyrax, that is going to be the place to jump in and see what the latest is. Also, getting information and sharing across implementations that are happening within the community. So that'll be hopefully what we're doing with the interest group going forward. So so in that regard, the product owner is doing a lot of engaging with the Samvera community. The time that's expected for the product owner is in this volunteer role is about 20% of time for each week. So it's about 1 day per week to work on these things. So who is this Hyrax product owner? That's me, Julie Hardesty. I'm at Indiana University, and a little bit about where I'm coming from here. I've worked on the Avalon Media System project, which is another project within the Samvera community. I've been a metadata specialist on that project since 2012, a subject matter expert. And I've also been a member of the Samvera Metadata Interest Group since 2015, and I facilitated that group for a few years, that interest group. So I'm picturing the Hyrax interest group working along the same lines of how we've had the metadata interest group working. So that sort of engagement and wanting the community to be involved. I'm a certified Agile Scrum Master, so I've got a little bit of certification in the Agile process, and I've been involved in the Agile process for a while. And I served as a product owner recently for some ArcLight development work that's happened at IU. So I've had just a little taste of product ownership in a way. But I am here to learn and to help move Hyrax along as a software application and to serve the community and serve the Hyrax product needs. And also steward both the Hyrax software application forward as well as the Hyrax product owner role forward into the future. And what I want to talk about next is some of the areas of focus. And I'm going to start off talking about the people priorities that I think exist. And I think I've ordered these in a sense in priority order, but this is the start of a conversation. So I think this is where I am now, but it doesn't necessarily mean this is where things stay. But I think the top thing at my list in terms of what people are interested in is looking at what the partners are interested in getting out of Hyrax, and almost equally to that are places that are implementing Hyrax, what sorts of things and what sorts of interests and needs they have from Hyrax as a software application, what things they're experiencing. And in that same sense, Hyku interests, places that are using Hyku are also using Hyrax. And so those interests and concerns are also valuable to what I need to know about. And similarly, next up, I think, is developer interests. There's a lot of work that's been happening on the back end to try and adjust how things work with back-end storage for Hyrax. And I think that is a way to make things easier for developers working with Hyrax, doing things with Hyrax. And I want to make sure that those sorts of interests are still front and center. And then potential Hyrax adopters. I think the folks that are looking at Hyrax but haven't decided whether or not to use it yet, I think that is another area that I'm interested in staying in touch with and learning more about, if I can. What is it that would make someone decide that Hyrax is something worth trying? So, and then at the end of all this, I have my own interests with Hyrax, centering around metadata and usability and accessibility. And I kind of think that a lot of the things that I'm interested in are also areas that these other groups have an interest in as well. So, so that's what I'm thinking of in terms of people that will be a focus. And then software priorities in terms of what's happening right now. The immediate work for Hyrax is the Hyrax 3.0 release, and that is in the works. It's in process right now. There's been quality assurance testing that's happened recently, and there have been some things that have come up with that are being worked through right now. But I do think that there is a release in sight, so that's happening. And that release has several things happening with it, and I'm just reading from what's been listed on the site, and I'm still learning about what all 3.0 is doing. But there'll be updates to support Rails 5.2 and Ruby 2.7. There are changes to default metadata that will use better properties and set things up better for basic required information about digital objects. And there are updates to IIIF that support file versioning and transparent PNGs. And then there's an introduction of Valkyrie and Wings to the code base. And that is something that's going to be an ongoing priority even after Hyrax 3 is released. For Wings, what this is meaning, my understanding of what this is meaning is that right now, connections are coded to make calls to Fedora using active Fedora. But with Wings, those calls can be changed to use the Valkyrized adapter way of making calls to Fedora instead. So that code is there, but it needs to be tested. And I know Lynette Rail at Cornell University has done some testing along those lines, and I think is going to be talking about that experience later on in Samvera Connect. And I'm really interested to see what that talk entails. But there needs to be more testing, so there's still an ongoing priority to do that. And this testing is going to allow us to figure out how the Valkyrie, how future adapters can be added to allow for other backend connections in addition to the adapter that connects to Fedora. So being able to connect to something like Postgres or a different backend storage system. So that's going to be ongoing work that will continue. And then once Hyrax 3 is out, obviously if there's any bugs or outstanding issues that arise from Hyrax 3, we'll be dealing with those. And then other areas that I'm interested in moving towards with in terms of software are looking at flexible metadata, more work types available by default, and then really focusing in on what Hyku needs for Hyrax, and also looking at usability and accessibility and checking in on what's happening with that. So I think throughout all of this, there's going to be, I'm very excited that Heather Greer-Klein is here as the community manager. I'm going to be doing a lot of communicating with her, I'm sure. And then working with the Hyrax interest group, sharing what's happening with Hyrax and getting feedback on that from that interest group. And then working with the roadmaps alignment group to ensure that what we're doing with Hyrax is fitting in with what the Samvera community is doing. But I'm also possibly interested in, with the community manager, if Heather is interested in this, in looking at community surveys regarding Hyrax and getting some potentially more quantifiable information about what Hyrax is what the Hyrax needs are within the community. And also possibly looking externally at those potential Hyrax adopters. Institutional repository and digital collection management needs, just discussing that with folks that are external to the community that might be looking in to see what Hyrax is doing or what the Samvera community is doing. So the other part that I'm wanting to work on as the Hyrax product owner here is looking at this role long term. So I am, what I've agreed to is to serve for 2 years in this role, starting now, going through October 2022. So kind of 2 Samvera Connects. So this, I think this means that we'd be starting to engage the community for the next Hyrax product owner in the spring or summer of 2022. I'm wanting to set that up. That's kind of how things worked for me. The call came out earlier in the year, like December, January, and I was able to make a decision in the spring, late spring, that this was something that I could do. I wanted to do it, and I was able to figure out that it was something that I could do. But I still, even after I agreed to do this, I still needed some time to adjust my schedule to allow for that 1 day a week, 20% time to be able to focus on Hyrax work. So having some ramp up time for that over the last few months has been important for me to kind of get into what's happening and change things around with my own schedule. So I'm hoping in the spring or summer of 2022 that we have someone that's interested in coming in as the next HireX product owner and doing that ramp up work for changing out to that next HireX product owner at Samvera Connect in October 2022. And so part of this stewarding this role forward is trying to put together some documentation about what the role is doing, resources that are necessary to understand as the product owner, so that someone can come in and catch up on what's happening and then move things forward with HireX as a software product. And it is possible to pass the baton, as it were. So I also kind of wanted to share things that I'm thinking about in terms of HireX as a product, what I would like to see it be. So I want it to be something that's easy to install and try. I think being able to try this out easily is paramount. I also think the demonstration site is fantastic, and I want to make sure that that remains something that's stable and available and is useful for what we need it for. I'm also interested in looking at multiple work types available by default. So beyond generic work and image, I know there's been discussions of things like an audio-visual work. The Avalon team has been looking at that. So seeing if that sort of thing can happen so that it's available with HireX on install, I think would be really, really helpful. And then looking at the metadata strategy so that we have something that is easier to configure for metadata fields per work type. And that flexible metadata is going to be something I think figuring out how that work can be integrated into HireX is going to be great for HireX as a product. And I'm also interested in looking at more controlled vocabulary choices out of the box on more fields like subject, making things like that just easier to turn on, easier to choose from options that are available. Questioning authority has gotten us very far along in doing that. So I'm really excited to contemplate what more we can do there. And then also this getting back to Valkyrization, getting closer to an easy switch out on the back end. So at least having something where you can choose between Fedora and one other thing for backend out of the box with HireX. So in contemplating what that list is, once I wrote it out, my sense is that a lot of these things are actually already happening in some way, either with different implementations within the community or with HireX development efforts that are already happening. So I think that is a really good sign. I want to become better aware of what local work is happening, and I'm hoping the HireX interest group is one major way that we can make that happen. And I think a lot of that can be helpful to further the things that the Samvera community wants with HireX. So my goals here are to understand what's happening and what the needs are, and then organize what we've got going on and engage the community moving forward. So thank you. And if there are questions or comments at this point, I think there's a few minutes before we get to break time here.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to use the Q&A tool and I can ask Julie the questions. Julie, so there's a question, when will the HireX interest group meetings be held?
The HireX interest group meetings are once a month, and I believe they happen on the second Tuesday right now. The second Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, I believe is when they're scheduled. Someone can probably check me on that. I know it's Tuesday, but I think it's the second one. So, and I'll be, part of what I'm going to be doing is sending out notices to the community group lists to announce when the meetings are happening. So we get some regular notice about that going out with agendas and with notes afterwards.
So that's all the questions we have at the moment. We still have one more minute until intermission. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to submit them.
Can't decide if I want to stop sharing to see faces or.
Right,
Thank you all very much. I'm excited.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie, for the wonderful presentation, Hyrax. So we have a brief intermission for the next 10 minutes, and then we have some presentations this afternoon if you're in the Eastern time zone. So yeah, see everybody back here in about 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back everyone to Samvera Connect 2020. My name is Brian McBride and I work at the University of Utah. I am a white male in my 30s. I have glasses and, as my wife would say, I have COVID hair. I haven't had a haircut in almost a year. And I'm currently in my home office that overlooks the beautiful Wasatch Front Mountain Range. Next up, presentation on Valkyrie, an update, and I'm going to hand it off to Trey Pendragon at Princeton University.
Hey everybody, can everyone see my screen okay?
See your screen, Trey.
Great. So I'm Trey Pendragon. I'm a developer at Princeton and the technical lead for Valkyrie. I'm a white guy in his 30s. I've got blonde hair and a beard, and even more than normal, I could really use a haircut. So today I'm going to try to give you an update on Valkyrie, but I'm sort of assuming that there are 3 audiences here. There are those of you who have never heard of Valkyrie, or maybe you're confused about what it is. I'll clarify some of that. There are people who know exactly what it is, but they don't really know why we would ever do such a thing. I'm going to spend a lot of time describing why that's the case. And then there are the people who have seen this presentation more than once, and you're about to check your email. And I promise there's new stuff. I mean, check your email, I guess, but it's all new slides, 2020 edition, which might be a bad thing to say, but I guess we'll find out. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk about what Valkyrie is, talk about why Valkyrie is a thing. I'm going to talk about what happened this year. Spoiler alert, it's like one slide. And then we're going to talk about what we're doing next and how you can help. So what is Valkyrie? Valkyrie is a Norse myth. Maybe you've heard of it. There's some great stories. They've got wings and cool helmets oftentimes. There's really good art that I probably should have put on this slide, but I didn't. It's also a cool word I picked for a library in an airport one day. At the time, it was a Rails application. Today, it's a lovely library that I'll go on to describe. And it's also a data mapper ORM with adapters and practices suited to digital repositories. I realize that's probably the least useful sentence for describing what this is. So we're going to try that one more time. Valkyrie replaces Active Fedora. Active Fedora is the way we save data to our database, Fedora, similar to Active Record. It takes our metadata and it puts it in a place. The big difference between Valkyrie and Active Fedora is that it splits representation of the object and persistence and queries from one another. So instead of having one thing that can save itself, I have one object. All it does is describe itself. It has things like title, author, publisher, etc. And I pass that over to a persister or a query service to go get that thing, or to save that thing, or to delete it, or do a whole variety of stuff. What this means for you is you're not going to be able to do resource.save, which would bind it to one place, or resource.findby, or resource.where.accept that includes that destroy. None of that. Can't do any of those things. There are different ways to handle the same sort of use cases. And importantly, probably the reason why you might be interested is Valkyrie lets you use Fedora, Solr, Postgres, disk storage, cloud storage, or write your own adapter for your use cases really fast, but have all the same APIs so you can hang out with your friends and figure out features that we can do for our patrons. So you might say, Trey, what does this actually mean for me? How's this going to change my code? This is a very old table. I know I said that I had all new slides and it was a lie. In this one, you can see a comparison between what we'll do in Active Fedora and what it looks like in Valkyrie. For instance, if I want to find a record, it's book.find in Active Fedora and Active Record. In Valkyrie, I instead call the query service for a specific adapter and pass it the ID, and it'll give it back. Book.save will save a thing, versus Valkyrie, which is take my book. Here you go, adapter. Please save me. Same thing for delete. In order to save to Fedora and Solr, you have no choice in active Fedora. You're going to save to both of them. In Valkyrie, you can mix and match various backends and have them all respond to the same API, which means you can transparently save to multiple places via some sort of combined adapter, and all your code will look the same. If you want to save only to Fedora and active Fedora, you can't do it, or you could maybe, but it would be really hard and it wouldn't look great. In Valkyrie, you just pass it to the adapter. If you wanted to save to Postgres in active Fedora, well, you're probably talking about a new application, or not using the library at all, I guess. In Valkyrie, you just pass it to the Postgres adapter. It looks all the same. If you want to migrate, this happens a lot in active Fedora in my experience. For instance, if you want to change DC contributor to DCE contributor, the modeling of what that property is built into the resource and how you save it. So pulling it out and putting it back is really difficult. I may or may not be scarred by this particular experience. But in Valkyrie, all of that definition sits inside the adapter. So you just pull it out one way, and then you put it into a new adapter and it saves it the new way. And you don't have to worry about, how do I run 2 different versions of this thing at the same time? Architecturally, this is what it looks like. There are 2 big pieces in Valkyrie. There are metadata adapters. This is where I save things that have like title and publisher and et cetera, et cetera. There are a bunch of queries inside a query service that are named queries, so that when the Fedora developers come and ask us and they say, hey, what queries do you actually use to make your repository work? We can say, oh, these ones, instead of literally all of them. And at the same time, it provides us a nice way to be like, oh, well, these ones were hard to implement, so maybe there's some mismatch between our use cases, and maybe there's some feature we have to add to that backend. Persisters handle saving, and they all give back a resource. Change sets, I am not going to go super far into. If you'd like to talk about them, we can talk about them in a channel or in Q&A or something like that, but resources don't have validations, and change sets give you a way to give them validations as well as handle things like forms. Storage adapters are, I want to save to the cloud, like binary content, or I want to save to Fedora, or I want to save to disk. They output files. This is a very similar system to something like Shrine or Active Storage. You'll notice there's no link between storage adapters and metadata adapters. Files just happen to have IDs. So you can say, associate a file with a resource through the metadata. And that's on purpose. You could totally replace all of that storage adapter business with some other library if that's what you wanted to do. But we do have storage adapters for Fedora, so that does help. But I think the really important part of this particular presentation is, why would you ever want to do this? There are other libraries out there. There are bigger communities out there. We could just use one of those various libraries, couldn't we? And I think the reasoning behind that is 3 things. We can't make up our minds. Code's hard and friends are good. What I mean by that, we can't make up our minds is, in 2016, when I worked on Valkyrie, these are the various things, or when I first started Valkyrie with the community, these are the various things I heard. Fedora is slow, Fedora is great, Fedora 3 was better, Elasticsearch is better, Postgres is great, Postgres is awful. Storing things is hard, background workers keep timing out need transaction. Triple stores are great. Oh, they don't support our triple store anymore. Solr is great, Rethink DB is cool. Oh, that company's gone. Why can't my authors be sorted? What about NoSQL? Migrations are hard. And most importantly, I think, is how can we use my tools, the ones that I've decided are right? And that last point is actually, the one that I really struggled with at first. Why can't we all together pick the right tool? And of course, in my head at the time, it was, why can't we pick my tool? But in speaking to my colleagues and my friends and all of the great minds here in Samvera, I realized, what if they're all the right tool? Technology, institutions, opinions are complex. We're all working in a set of different circumstances and different restrictions and with different use cases. everyone's doing the best that they can. So Valkyrie aims to make that allow you to make that decision, test it, and share your results as quickly as possible. So that's principle number 1 of Valkyrie. Make it easy to support your tech. Sorry, okay. The other thing is code's hard. Active Fedora works. Very few people know how it works, and even fewer of those are still working on it. This isn't the fault of anybody. Active Fedora is a complicated library. There are lots of features that it needs to support. It's just sort of how it happened. We use very few external dependencies for that whole stack, and the maintenance burden is all on us. And our profession has some unique use cases that we can't just pull from another library. I promise I'll get back to that, but not right now, because I assume some people are like, are you sure? So if code's hard, then one of our principles should be do less code so that less code is hard. So that's principle 2, use the smallest amount of code possible to meet the requirements. Valkyrie's about 5,300 lines of code. Active Fedora's 9,000 is not a fair comparison. They do totally different sets of things. Active Fedora is a bunch of query stuff, and it's really smart about saving some things. Valkyrie stores to like 6 places. Like they're not the same libraries, but on the metric of there's just less stuff, it does help. Principle number 3, if we're gonna write less code, then we still have the same use cases. Let's let other people write our code for us. So use external dependencies with communities whenever possible. Let's build in larger portions of communities so that we don't have to maintain that software and we can trust it. So Valkyrie's core is handled by a bunch of, they're like dry types and dry schema and dry core libraries. Reform handles change sets. Active record handles saving in Postgres. RSolar handles saving to Solar, and files supports like disk storage and things like that. Those cases where there aren't external libraries that we can use really are the biggest portions of the code base. So 1,300 lines of code are just the Fedora adapter. Just because there aren't external dependencies to use there. So we have to take on that burden. We used to use Active Fedora to try to lower this, but it seemed pretty silly to propose replacing Active Fedora with a library that depended on it. So you might ask me, what about Hanami or Ruby Object Mapper or various other data mapper things? I will say I tried, and several of us have tried very hard. Either writing an adapter for those was too hard, they made too many assumptions about what we were doing, or they didn't support an important use case. Some of these are really good at relational database management systems and not necessarily things like triple stores and Postgres. Other ones, it would be hard to fit some of these use cases. So if I say that, what are the use cases that make us special? There are a lot of them, but these are a few that I think of immediately. Our data is really complicated. It's hierarchical. We're always changing and always moving data around. Several of our partners want a field to have 2 types of data. This is especially problematic for relational databases. So an author might have 2 values. I might have a URI that's an author, and I also have the string trait Pendragon. It's unlikely. I've never authored anything. And there's also RDF concerns. I have to be able to say that a string is in a particular language, and various other use cases that are not really library specific, but more common in our profession, certainly. We also often change our minds about which fields go where, how data should be represented or output. So it's really important for our data to be flexible. And number 4 was sort of a late point. Was the order of our metadata turns out to be really important, but only sometimes, and often we find out it's important later. So we have to make sure we can apply order and make assertions about it no matter what system we're in. So if this is true, then how do I prove that we support the use cases? And this is principle number 4. All of the adapters that are built into the system, as well as any external adapters, have to be able to be verified via a suite of shared tests. So Valkyrie provides a bunch of RSpec tests that you can run on your adapter or even in your application just to verify that the use cases that people have brought forward as necessary for our software work for that adapter. It does a bunch of things like testing RDF and testing ordered properties and testing that all the various queries work. All of that you can be sure and confident when you apply an adapter that passes those tests that they're going to meet those use cases. So those are the principles. I personally look to these when I'm working on Valkyrie, but I really should add it to our documentation. And they're also open for discussion. So the last point I said was important was having friends. The hope with Valkyrie is that if each of us can make our own decision about where we store things, but we can still have the same code and the same APIs, and we can work together on shared solutions still. There was some concern when Valkyrie started that it would create this rift in the community, that suddenly people would not all be storing to the same place, so that would be a problem. But I think the reality of the situation is, in the past, we all had these same concerns about where we were storing things. People were going to implement those no matter what. And now at least we can provide shared solutions on top of no matter what backend you're pushing to. And we can have a more stable base for everybody. So that's why. Here's the state of Valkyrie. Software is stable. Last release was on March 12th, version 2.1.1. There are multiple applications that are running Valkyrie in production. Nobody's asked for any big features recently. There are a couple of things that we need to work on that I'll get to in just a second. There are 2 stable production systems representing millions of objects and hundreds of terabytes of data. There is Figgy, which is the repository at Princeton, and there is also the Duke repository. Work is being done to put Hyrax, or to put Valkyrie into Hyrax so that you can enjoy all of this lovely work. They are headed towards full integration. It is a requirement of the product already. If you want to help make this happen, please talk to them. I wanted to give special thanks, like I do in all of these slides, to all of our contributors, as well as the administrations of their institutions that have allowed them to work on this product with me. So what happened this year? I promised this would be quick. So we added support for Fedora 6. We didn't do anything. They have the same API that they had before that we depend on. Thank you to Esme for testing. We released some model constraints with some queries, and Duke released a repository. And that's it. It's been a long year, as I'm sure you can guess. What's next? Here's a roadmap. The slides are available for here, so you can click this. We're going to work on some Solr indexing stuff. We're going to get rid of Draper. We're going to add hashes in a sustainable way, and we're going to add some more documentation. This is pretty close to what the 2020 roadmap is. I'm basically renaming it to the 2021 roadmap. Hopefully next year goes better. How you can help? We do need a new product owner. Kate Lynch, thank you for acting as product owner so far. She has moved on to my institution, and we feel like it's important that we have viewpoints from multiple places in order to better represent the software. If you're implementing this and you want to be a larger part, get a hold of me. Keep your eyes out for Community Sprint next year. And if you want to get a hold of us, we are in the Valkyrie channel on Slack. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Trey, for the update on Valkyrie. And we just have 1 minute. So probably don't have time for Q&A, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit, and we'll pass those along to Trey and the team at Valkyrie. Next up is the work on Avalon, an update from John Cameron at Indiana University.
All right, thanks, Brian. Hello, I'm John Cameron. I am another white guy in his 30s with brown hair down to my shoulders, longer, depending on how long the pandemic goes. And behind me, I'm just in my home office. And today I'm going to give the Avalon updates. So I am the product owner for Avalon Media System, and I work at Indiana University Libraries, where I'm the digital media service manager. So I manage IU's audio and visual collections online for the library. And today I'm going to talk about what's new in Avalon over the past year. So what is Avalon Media System? Very quickly, it is a Samvera solution bundle that's designed primarily for audio and video access. So it's an access platform. We don't have a view to a lot of other things. We're primarily about getting stuff online and making it accessible, although we do have other features in the application for preservation or other sort of digital library things. It was jointly developed by IU and Northwestern for a very long time. Only by IU since last year when Northwestern shifted to other priorities. And right now we're supported, or we were supported by grants from the Mellon Foundation and IMLS over the years. We're currently at version 7.1.1 and Avalon development is, as always, ongoing. So features that, what makes Avalon Avalon? Features we have that include of course, handles AV as the primary purpose of the system to make it really easy for people to take their audiovisual materials and get them online. So in addition, we have other things that are sort of Avalon special features, such as really granular access control for right down to the user group, IP address level, directory groups. We also have things like playlists. We have a batch ingest feature. We have a fairly robust API for interacting both with the player and with data in the system. And then we have a lot of other sort of things that are special to AV, such as structural metadata. So defining, times and points of interest within a particular file for tracks or any other information that you might want to represent there. And then we have other things like, support for permalinks, sharing and embedding in the player. All sorts of different things. So the Avalon team, you can see everybody here on the slide. I want to say thanks to the whole Avalon team. Right now it is everyone you see on the screen, and we are hiring for a lead software engineer position at the moment. So hopefully we can get someone into that position soon. Right now we're much lower in staff than we would have been in the past, but we're still doing a lot, and I'm going to cover that in just a moment. I should say we also have a vacant software engineer position. So who's using Avalon? My last count was 18 institutions in production, and there are others that are currently evaluating and testing. So we have a list that's currently being updated. So one of the things that we want to do, as Julie mentions, we are looking for a vacation software engineer. So we're running a survey right now because we really want to know who's using Avalon in the community. What's their status? Are they in production or not? Are they interested in, so if you're using Avalon and you haven't taken the survey yet, please do so. We're, trying to update everyone who uses Avalon, the partners, all that sort of stuff. So what's new in Avalon over the past year? So Avalon 7 came out in January 2020. So this included a lot of stuff. So Avalon 7 was a big release for us. It was our last release where we had the full team and people from Northwestern working on it as well. So we did a big redesign of the homepage. We added local user management, which was something that people were very interested in having in Avalon for a long time. We added a new transcoding pipeline. So we sloughed off a lot of dependencies. Added a new transcoding dashboard where you can check out all the transcoding that's going on and check on it, and collections landing pages and collections indexes. So before we only had a sort of a basic blacklight interface for browsing and navigating the site, and with a lot of collections in the system, it can add up, and we really wanted a better way to present that. So we have this new collection interface where each collection has a landing page. There's a preview of material inside that collection. You can do a quick keyword search for quick results. And we have this sort of card layout that we've done on both the collections index and then with the collection itself on this page to view all the stuff within. So Avalon 7.1 came out in April 2020, sort of less of a major release, but the one thing that we really focused on in this release is API changes and updates. As we have more people using Avalon and for different purposes, making sure data gets in and out of the system in a programmatically easy way is really valuable. So all these changes allowed us to be able to dynamically create objects better using just the API, make sure that the stuff that people were getting back from the system were better, changing permissions so that those could be applied to API requests. So this makes it much easier now to interact with an Avalon based repository and interoperate. So this also had the various styling and visual improvements, bug fixes, more dependency removals. Each release, we sort of just keep removing these dependencies bit by bit. So Avalon 7.1.1, this was in July 2020. This was a much smaller release, but we did update a couple things. One is email and website contact fields for collections so that people are more easily able to get in touch with collection managers and things like that. So, somebody has an interest in a specific item in the system, how do they contact a specific person or how do they find out more? A lot of the units and collections that are set up, in these sort of map to a specific service or departmental unit or something like that. And then we also added a lot of IIIApp stuff. So IIIApp auth support in the manifests that are generated from Avalon. So Avalon has supported IIIApp 3.0 presentation manifests since release 6.5. So there is a route in Avalon that you can use to get the manifest for any item. And then there are also support for the probe service. So this is really proving out their IIIApp manifest generation in ways that have really worked out. And then we did a bunch of improvements to our structural metadata editor, which I'll show in a moment. Okay, so Avalon 7.2, this is the one that is just about to be released. So in Avalon 7.2, we have a number of larger features again. So we added support for supplemental files. So that can be any binary file that you can associate with an item or a section in Avalon. Items in Avalon are the object, and then sections are the files. And we also revamped our file management UI. All the stuff that we had added for supplemental file support really made our interface cramped. And so we ended up rearranging some of the stuff and the layout just to make it easier to use. We also added an authentication page that comes up, and I'll show that off in a minute. Applying new permissions to items across a collection, and then these smaller Sidekick things. So we switched to using Sidekick from Rescue in an earlier Avalon release. And so this is, hey, we want to run our cron jobs via Sidekick, and then the Sidekick dashboard, which has always been available in a /jobs route, was added to our actual managed navigation. So all the navigation within Avalon for administrators sort of presents all the stuff that you can actually get to in the system. Okay, yeah, supplemental files. So as I said, we revamped our manage files page because everything before was in this structure section over here, which was quickly overloaded both visually and semantically. And so we've moved all of the caption files and supplemental files to this view here, this manage files. So now clicking edit here will allow you to upload captions or any specific file. Files that can be uploaded are stored just in Fedora in the usual way. Unlike a lot of the media that goes through an Avalon, which is generally outside of Fedora in some other file store. Let's see. So another thing that we added is applying access controls across a collection. So this was always possible in the selection-based bulk management that we have available in Avalon, but it's really inconvenient to, via Blacklight, have to select thousands of items in a collection and then apply access controls using like the bulk modal dialogues. So this instead is an extra button that we've added to the collections, the collections administrative page. So it just says apply to all existing items. So now, for example, if you add a group or a user to the default access controls for a collection, you can just apply it to every item within. And this is, just one of those time saving things that's been really, really of interest to users. And you can sort of see that a lot of these things are sort of based on user feedback, people actually using the system and saying, hey, I wish we had this or that. And this is definitely one of those things. So another thing we added was authentication flow. So before in Avalon, if you went to a restricted item, you were just basically bounced to the homepage with a message. And that really wasn't going to work, since so much of the content that we have and might be available in other Avalons as well is restricted content that needs authentication before it can be accessed. And so we changed the authentication flow. So instead, users will land on this call to action page to say, hey, you're not signed in. This is even when students are, signed in via single sign-on, they might still not be signed into the application, or whatever the case is. So this is something that's very nice. I think it will change. So besides the 7.2 release, which I mentioned is going to be released very soon, we have structural metadata updates. And the structural metadata editor is a React-based application that lives inside Avalon. It's this visual waveform-based interface for editing this structure, which we represent, or which we store as XML, that uses the BBC's Peaks.js waveform visualizer with some extra stuff. And so this is sort of a few bullet points of the past year in development. So this is kind of a thing that gets updated over time, lives in a separate repository, and then we just add the latest version of this to Avalon whenever we do a new release. So over the past year, we've done support for more granular time values, support for items without available audio data. So for example, a silent film where you want to be able to edit the metadata, you want to add chapters, but there's no audio data. And before, if there was no waveform information, the editor would just poop out. So space bars, finer precisions again, inline editing changes, all just to make it a little nicer of a user experience. And this structural metadata editor, in contrast with our sort of raw text XML-based editor, has really been heavily used. People really like this. It makes more sense to manage this visually, and I think it makes the time to create this sort of structural information much faster. So the other thing is Avalon Turnkey. So we've presented a number of times on Avalon Turnkey, but this is essentially, as that first bullet point says, our Docker-based turnkey deployment for AWS. So using Terraform provisioning, yeah, Avalon Turkey is also what you might refer to it as. But it's really easy to get started. It's seeing minor tweaks here and there all the time. I expect that we'll see a lot more people using Avalon in AWS as things shift, or more people start to use cloud infrastructure for their applications hosting. But this is something that's also sort of just an ongoing thing that we've done a lot of work on over the past year. So what's next? So in the year ahead, we want to do another Avalon 7 release. We want to work on our IIIF media player. And then of course, we want to eventually create that Hyrax-based Avalon. So first, Avalon 7.3. So is much smaller feature set, but the things that we want to target here are improved support for analytics. In particular, adding Google Tag Manager tags for representing semantic information within the page. So right now, if you run analytics on an Avalon site, it'll be a little hard to parse just because of the way Avalon is set up. And so we want to really make it easier for people to be able to say, what's the usage in this particular collection or among this set of items, and be able to drill down in a much more meaningful way. And the other thing that we want to add is Open Graph Protocol support, which is those, oops, sorry about that. Cat stepped on my keyboard, if you can believe it. Oh my God, okay, come here. Here you go. All right. Transcript display support is the other thing. Oh yeah. Open Graph Protocol. So those are when you put a link, into Slack or something, and it gives you that nice card that has, the poster image, descriptive metadata. It's sort of like that little bit for sharing and to embed content in other services or sites or social media especially. And so transcript display support. So in Avalon 7.2, we're adding support for supplemental files of any kind. And they're
your slides aren't sharing.
Oh, my slides aren't sharing. Oh God, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Transcript display support. So I want to support standard file types that you might see transcripts stored in, but we also want to do what's been implemented in a lot of other places in products such as Aviary or in other things in the community where you can have a transcript document that allows you to view transcript material or other textual material, time synced if available, alongside the media content. So you can have that interactive navigation. You can have, the sort of richer experience. Closed caption support we already have, but we want to take it to that extra level, especially since we have more interest, in oral histories or other documents. Being able to store the document inside Avalon itself is a big thing. And then having that display support as well as the next step. And there's the TripLife media player. So this is our sort of in development next generation media player. Right now it is sort of, just a work in progress, but you can go check it out. I've got a screenshot here of our sort of standalone example environment where you can load in a TripLife manifest from a number of sources. So you can see here's one that we got from Princeton. And it will load it in the player. It will read structural information from the manifest, and it basically takes that manifest, parses it, runs it through the player, and it has it all there. But the advantage of this is, number one, IIIF natively. Right now in Avalon, the media player will take information from the app itself. But this is, generally designed to be a thing where we can have Avalon not only be able to produce that IIIF manifest, but also to consume it for the player itself. And then, be able to package it and make it available to the community. So we have like a really, really easy thing that anyone can take and bundle in their application and just throw on the page and use. So that's the goal. We have an upcoming community sprint. Please join us. It's going to be next month. You can check in with us about the details, but really we're going to work on tightening things up and packaging. And probably not in Avalon 7, but this will be, the media player that we want to use for Avalon natively in the future. So the next thing is Avalon on Hyrax. So that's still our future. That's still our plan. We want to transition back to after 7.3 to going to working on Avalon on Hyrax. We still have a lot of work that was previously completed. And then a number of things that we will continue to work with the community on, either features in Hyrax that we need for Avalon or Avalon's particular modification of Hyrax. And of course, we will continue to be a part of community development. We'll stay with the latest in Hyrax and Valkyrie. We work to upgrade our models and test things out. And we'll continue to do so. So that's our 2021. And the last thing I want to mention before my time is up is the support for Avalon implementers. So more people are interested in using Avalon, and we're doing our best we can to help them out. So we have our discussion mailing list, we have our public Avalon channel and Samvera Slack, We do a monthly user roundtable that anyone's free to join and talk with us about Avalon. Generally, there'll be a topic or a thing I'm showing off. And then we have on our website, more ways to get in touch with us. And we also have paid support. So thanks, John, for this. It's, IU is working with Oberlin and Emory to get Avalon up and running in their institutions. So thank you very much. I think I'm at time.
Thank you, John, for the update on Avalon. And our last presentation of the day is Work on Haiku, an update with Kevin Kochansky from Notch 8. Kevin? You can see your slides, Kevin. I'm not sure I'm hearing any audio.
Cool, just getting situated. Thank you, Brian. You can hear me now, right?
Correct.
Great.
Awesome.
So happy Friday, everybody. We're almost ready to wrap for the day. So thanks for sticking around. I'm Kevin Kochansky. I'm client liaison at Notch 8. I serve as the chair for the Haiku interest group, which meets once a month. And to describe myself, I am a white male in his mid 40s, though sometimes I still get 28. And I've got very closely cropped dark brown hair and that you could call bald, and a little bit of a scruff on my face. And I'm wearing a green checked shirt that is a bit tighter than it was in March. Thank you for joining us, and onward with Haiku in 2020. A little bit of background. We were asked to make this approachable to folks that might be new to the community. So I'll give a little bit of context on where Haiku sits in the Samvera context. Haiku is known as a solution bundle. So if you have the Samvera components that are core components sitting on Fedora and Solar, and Hyrax is a commonly used engine to create an application out of that. Haiku goes a step further and takes Hyrax and turns it into a turnkey solution that's out-of-the-box software that you can use as a repository. Hyrax and Haiku look very similar off the bat, and in fact, everything in Hyrax is also in Haiku, but Haiku adds a little bit to that. So just to quickly look at some of the differences and shared capabilities between the two. Both offer faceted search and browse experience. Both use universal viewer and IIIF support for images. Both allow the submission of new items. Both have a batch import, not a huge bulk import, but a batch import capability. And both utilize collection management and collection types. Both offer a mediated deposit workflow for reviewed submissions. Both include access controls and embargoes and leases that can be set on works. Items that are unique to Haiku, the kind of marquee item there is multi-tenancy. So what that means is that in one instance of the software, you can set up several discrete repositories. To explain this, a use case is a library consortia like the Palanine Palsy project. Between the two of them, they have 40 or 50 some member libraries. In one instance of the software, each library member can have its own discrete repository that to all eyes looks like it belongs to that library. Haiku also includes pre-built work types that beyond what comes out with Hyrax. It has the pre-installed bulk import and export with bulk racks, and it has a lot more out-of-the-box theming options than Hyrax. Hyrax has some color UI choices that the user can make or the admins can make. Haiku offers a lot more colors, fonts, branding, and logo options that you can do right from the admin console. And it also has built-in user management options. Some general updates around Haiku. Haiku 3.0 is almost out the door. This is going to include a bump to Hyrax 2.9, to Rails 5.2, and Ruby 2.7. The bulk racks import export tool is going to be behind a feature flipper, so this can be turned off or on at a per tenant level. That means each instance of a repository in a multi-tenant Haiku setup can decide to use bulk racks or not. And likewise, at the tenant level, you can now configure the contact us so that it's not universal for the application, but each repository can have its own contact us email flow. It also includes some user management elevation. Super admin across all tenants is going to be a feature, and there'll be allocation for SSO integration. The thing that's held this up a little bit was in the 11th hour, we discovered an issue that the community decided was worth holding the release for as it gets resolved. This is that there was a cross-tenant permission issue that was only applicable to institution-only items, not public or private items. The base permissions that it gives you may not be correct when you switch tenants. So that's a pretty isolated situation. Most people are not going to be switching tenants unless they have the same permissions across those tenants anyway, but it is unintended and is a potential risk. So we wanted to clean that up before releasing the new version of the software. We expect resolution for that and a 3.0 release before December. The Hyku interest group meets monthly, and sample agenda each month we look at pilot updates from the projects that are in motion for Hyku. These days we tend to get updates from PALNI and PALC on our Hyku for Consortia product, the Advancing Hyku grant, the British Libraries repository, and two Not-Shape projects, the Washington University St. Louis Newman Numismatic Portal and the US Department of Transportation's National Transportation Library. We also discussed the roadmap. That's an effort to align projects and formalize the features that will be included on the Hyku roadmap. We'll discuss release updates and any issues that come up there. We also welcome newcomers. So this is a call to anybody to please join this group if you have an interest, but or at least sit in on one. It's a welcoming environment like most things in the Samvera community. So we have seen a lot of new faces, and some folks just come in and listen and hear what's going on in Hyku. Some have questions, but it's always nice that people who are exploring repository options or even Hyku in particular are certainly welcome to join. And that's a Zoom meeting that meets the last Thursday of each month. A little bit of a recap on those active pilot projects that are currently in development. The National Transportation Library 3.0 is the US Department of Transportation's replacement for a legacy repository. Currently, Not-Shape are the lead developers on this, working with Illumin, and we're currently finalizing SSO integration and performing government security audit. Phase 1 should be delivered next month, which is very exciting. This is going to introduce the ability to edit controlled vocabulary fields, which we hope to get contributed back to Hyku soon. And it also features a custom and complex mediated deposit workflow beyond what Hyku offers out of the box. Another key project is the Shared Research Repository. This is a British Library managed multi-tenant repository for cultural heritage organizations in the UK. It's a shared repository of currently 6 separate tenant repos on one single Hyku instance. It features include datasite integration for DOI creation. Not all of the features of the repository will be considered for core Hyku. For instance, their public front end is a bespoke development. And currently they're in a successful beta repository. They're planning to move to full shared service for other organizations in January of next year. The Newman Numismatic Portal is a project with Washington University in St. Louis, and that's moving a collection from a legacy .NET application that they took over. This is actually a single tenant Hyku instance for a numismatic special collection. It has some relatively complex metadata relationships beyond parent and child, and it includes multiple unique work types related to coin collecting. So auction catalogs and price lists are some of those examples. And we'll be implementing an Internet Archive book reader for searchable, flippable PDFs that include transcripts. Haiku for Consortia is a collaborative repository for consortial member libraries. Their informational site is haikuforconsortia.org. I know they have their own blog. And that's with the private academic library consortium the Pennsylvania Academic Library Consortium Incorporated and the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana. It's a multi-tenant application in pilot stage that's across those two library consortia with many member libraries. They're working on collaborative workflow developments that will be contributed back. So far, we've successfully integrated the bulk racks tool for bulk import and used that. And they're currently, or next, will be focusing on multiple theming templates that they hope to contribute back. And these are going to accommodate various repository use cases. The feeling is that Haiku out of the box is very IR focused, and this might attract some other users to Haiku as a software. The Advancing Hyku grant project supports the growth of Haiku by introducing significant structural improvements and new features. Their informational site is advancinghaiku.io. And I'm sure you will have heard about this. It's big news, and it's a collaboration between University of Virginia, British Library, Ubiquity Press, and it's funded by Arcadia Charitable Foundation. Current updates on that are that they're working on adapting existing Hermeos metrics and general user analytics. Also working on ORCID integration, which is a common ask in the community. And we are happy to have Ilkay Holt join the community and the project on behalf of the British Library. Because of Haiku's multi-tenant functionality, it lends itself to a hosted service solution. A couple of those out there, Ubiquity Press offers u-repositories, which is at u-repo.io for information. And we at Notch8 offer Haiku Up and haikuup.com. We've recently relaunched our informational site there. Digging into the Haiku roadmap a little bit, there's a URL here, but you could probably get there a lot faster just by Googling Haiku roadmap. And that spelling makes it easy to find. It's also a pain on autocorrect. That's an effort for us to find synergy amongst the multiple concurrent projects in the community, as well as aligning with other roadmaps when we can. We've made this a regular agenda topic for the Haiku interest group meetings. So we tend to discuss 1 or 2 features a month that is either in progress and needs to get formalized on the roadmap, or something that's a wish list item that we feel like we should prioritize. We discuss and assess the broad usefulness of these plans to contribute to the code, or whether something might be too esoteric for core code. And when we reach a consensus there, we add that to the roadmap that's available on the wiki site. A couple items on the roadmap that are in progress or about to be added or under discussion include the DOI integration from Ubiquity Press's British Library project. There's also group and permission work coming from Notch8 and Palni Palsi that may add to the roadmap, and enhanced relationship work that comes from both Palni Palsi and the Washington University NMP project that goes a lot beyond parent-child to version of or is part of and those kind of relationships. Some potential future features that we've discussed include those theming templates for different use cases from Palni Palsi. The ORCID integration from Advancing Hyku sounds like a must. Controlled fields editor that comes from the Department of Transportation project may be useful. We've also heard Advancing Haiku is working on the automatic expiration of embargoes and leases, and there are cross-tenant search options as well that could be contributed back. Haiku has a pretty extensive presence at Connect this year. So we've already heard our keynote speaker, Torsten Reimer from the British Library, was making a lot of reference to their Haiku application. There was a workshop yesterday on Hyrax and Haiku that was a hands-on introduction. And starting next week, I count at least 4 Haiku-focused presentations, including supporting collaboration in haiku, the Ubiquity repositories presentation, a use case panel called Why Haiku across that has several community members, and Your Vote Matters on the Advancing Haiku project. I invite everybody to get more engaged with haiku and follow. So haiku.samvera.org is I keep looking at the wrong camera. Haiku.samvera.org is an informational site that we try to keep updated with presentations and demos that are in the community. You'll find listings for the presentations of this Connect that relate to haiku there. Slack, Samvera Slack has its own haiku channel. You're welcome to join that for questions or just to see what's going on with the haiku community. There is a Google group as well, and the haiku interest group, a little bit more information on that since I won't stop talking about it. It meets at 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern, and 4:30 UK time, the last Thursday of each month. And there is a Zoom link and agenda notes, previous meeting notes, and that sort of stuff, if you find that on the wiki as well. So I want to say thank you, and I feel like I've ended a little bit early. That might not be too bad since that was the last thing on the schedule for today. So thanks for listening, and I hope that everybody has a really great Connect.
Thank you, Kevin. We do have a few minutes if everybody wants to submit any questions to Kevin using the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Just give it a minute. All right, looks like there's no questions. Thank you, Kevin, for the update on Haiku.
Thanks, Brian.
So just wrapping up. I just wanted to give thanks to everyone for joining us today at Connect 2020. I want to thank Torsten for a wonderful keynote, and thank you to Rosie, Jessica, Carolyn, Heather, Julie, Trey, John, and Kevin for presenting today, and those who are presenting at Connect 2020. Without you, Connect 2020 does not happen. I also want to thank everyone who's helped make Connect this year possible. So please join us next week for the continuation of Samvera Connect 2020 with presentations, working group and interest group updates, and lightning talks. You'll see the times available at the screen. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend and a great Samvera Connect. Take care, everyone.